Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and today's weekend best of special. Another busy week in the world of politics. Oh gosh, it's never ending, right? But it's kind of cool and interesting, but cringy. There's so much. As the Democrats made their vice presidential selection and we were sold a bunch of nonsense, it was a bit of a surprise. And when the news broke that Kamala Harris had picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, we brought on Rich Lowry and Batya Ungar-Sargon for instant analysis about this guy's truly radical policies. Oh, he's just folksy, we're told. Cool dad. I guess with her wine mom or aunt. Sure. Okay. But it was more serious than that. And this week, we also had on the veteran who replaced Tim Walz in what should have been Walz's 2005 combat deployment to Iraq, but wasn't because Walz quit on the National Guard, knowing that they were getting deployed. He was the commander. It was his unit. He sent them off with a see ya. This guy told me, his name is Tom Behrens, why Tim Walz, in his view, is a traitor and a deserter. I also talked to Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch to give some behind-the-scenes details about the life and work going on at the Supreme Court and why we have too many laws in America. We got into some really interesting ones and just the way our government harasses us all. How did we let it get like this? Neil Gorsuch has answers. And I asked him about that moment that Trump was almost assassinated. Trump's the one who appointed him. It was an interesting exchange. Plus, I set the record straight about the men competing in women's boxing in the Olympics. You are all being gaslit. Yes, these are two males, and it's outrageous. Thanks for watching. See you Monday. You know, Batya, I'm thinking about the imagery, right? You've got, former Marine, and he did deploy, young guy, Semper Fi, you heard the whole thing. And on the other hand, you have Tim Walz, who did serve for 20 years as National Guardsman, but has this significant black mark at the end of it. And who's, effectively running to be stand-in for Commander-in-Chief. And as we're seeing right now in real time, being in the VP role actually can foist you into that role, whether officially or unofficially, sooner than expected. Meanwhile, and the reason I think it's interesting in addition is because I mentioned in the intro, Tim Walz changed the Minnesota flag to look almost exactly like the Somali flag. I mean, it's a dead ringer for the flag of Somalia. It's got the highest population of Somalis than any other state in America. And you look at Kamala Harris's website, we noticed this the other day. Good luck finding an American flag on there. Good luck finding one policy. One. Nothing. You know what it is? It's LGBTQ pride merch. That's what's on her website. You go to the Trump website, it's covered in American flags. His motto is Make America Great Again. It's his campaign slogan. He's got his former Marine out there. They talk about America and their love of country at every turn. And so I do see this dividing pretty quickly into the pair that loves America and what it stands for, and the pair that doesn't.
Yeah, on the policy front, it really is amazing. Of course, which policies should she put on her website? The ones that she held a year ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 5 minutes ago, right? She's such a flip-flopper that it would be very hard to pin her down. The split screen is very, very significant here. You have Kamala Harris reportedly choosing the less charismatic, less challenging of the potential mates, whereas Donald Trump went for a man who is clearly going to be the standard bearer for the future of the MAGA movement. You have the Harris agenda, which amounts to basically a Yossification campaign, right? A Yoss queening, right, to the top with no actual policy. And then you have Donald Trump's record on the economic front that really made working class Americans feel like they had a shot at the American dream again. You have the Democrats caving to the elites in their party, President Obama, George Clooney, Nancy Pelosi effectively choosing the next president on their ticket as opposed to the voters. And then you have Donald Trump again and again sidelining the elites in his party, whether it's Project 2025 or whether it's the donor class who picked Nikki Haley, right? There are really two visions for the future of America at stake here. One of them says, I am going to be a perfect reflection of my voter base. I'm going to represent the multi-ethnic, multiracial social working class and their shot at the American dream. And the other side says, no, I'm going to reflect no policy. I'm simply going to be a reflection of, elite energy, right? Elite
vibes,
discourse, right? Exactly. Elite vibes, the vibes that the elites want to see out there and hope to trick the American people into going along with it.
But this election, Rich, in a way telegraphs exactly which Kamala Harris we're dealing with. Is she the 19 one who proposed getting rid of private health insurance and who wanted to ban fracking and all the things, open the border, all of it? Is that her? Or is she this new moderate, as the campaign written statements have suggested that she's reversed herself on all of that? We have yet to hear from her at all. This election tells us everything we need to know. This guy Walz, we just went through the list. Okay. First of all, Minnesota schools have dropped from 7th in the nation to 19th under his gubernatorial reign. He wants driver's licenses for all illegals. He wants free tuition for all illegals. He wants free healthcare, has provided, not just wants, has provided free healthcare for all illegals. And as I said in the intro, free is not free. He wants to make Minnesota a sanctuary state. It's not yet, but he's on record saying, yes, I would like that. That makes sense to me. He has supported the Biden-Harris economic agenda. And here's the capper. He's as radical as we can get on the trans and children issue. He is Gavin Newsom with white hair. That's who Tim Walz is. He signed an executive order that says the state can take your child away from you, if you don't, quote, affirm their gender identity, meaning they say they're a girl when they're really a boy, and make sure they can get access to puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries, chopping off their healthy body parts. If your 13 or 14-year-old comes home and says, I want to be castrated, and you say no, Tim Walz wants the state to take your kid away from you. That's as radical as we have anywhere in the world on this issue, Rich.
Yeah, just shocking. And to the 2019 point, Tim Walz would have been totally comfortable in that primary, right? He wouldn't have had to change any of the positions he has now, right? Kamala became more left, and now she's telling she isn't anymore. Walz is still with all those 2019 positions. And ultimately, it's Kamala's positions that matter more. But the case you can make against her is that this reflects her values. This reflects where she really is. And the idea that the state is going to be weaponized against parents who want their disturbed or ill children who have gender dysphoria to be treated in a rational way where you try to wait it out and hope it's a phase that passes, rather than introducing these radical measures that, Western Europe, UK are now rejecting because there's no science behind them whatsoever. And we still have it in America and in the heartland. That's stunning. It'll be part of the case against him. And J.D. Vance was already making it this afternoon.
But look, Batya, at how the media is already rolling out the red carpet for this guy. Get used to this, because we're going to have 3 more months just like it. Take a look at SOT 9.
Walz appears to fit the all-American definition of a man from middle America. High school teacher, football coach, member of the Army National Guard before becoming a member of Congress and now governor.
Exactly. He really has that perfect backstory. He's the one, George, remember, who labeled J.D. Vance and his Republican allies as, quote, weird, which gained a lot of steam with the Harris campaign. He has this folksy, personal, informal vibe that has really appealed to a lot of Democrats, and they believe that his rural backstory, the fact that he was a former member of the NRA, as you say, he is this former high school teacher, he was a football coach, that this can help appeal to those independent swing state voters.
Independent swing state voters, Batya. They're going to love him because he's folksy and was once a member of the NRA. And then they're going to say, here, have my child start chopping.
The media thinks that because they don't care about policy, because they are rich and elites and don't have to worry about pocketbook issues or issues like, what's going on with their kids in public schools because their kids are all in private school, right? Therefore, the only thing that matters is vibes, right? Therefore, the only thing that matters is, does somebody give off a folksy vibe, right? What is their backstory? Same thing with Kamala Harris. They don't care what she represents. They only care what she looks like, right? They only care about the story. policy because they are not facing the kinds of struggles that average Americans are struggling with every single day. Now, Walz did do some things that are, pretty good for working class Americans. He established a standard for nursing homes, very important. He banned non-compete clauses, very important for working class Americans. And he also required a certain level of transparency in warehousing, which is really important for Amazon workers. This is all stuff that really matters and stuff that, Republicans really need to be paying attention to, because that is the only threat that he actually represents. And honestly, it's clear that that is not what they are putting, that is not the basket they're putting their eggs in, right? He's not being trotted out as somebody who's good for workers. He's not being trotted out as someone who can restore the American dream for the struggling working class. He's being trotted out as someone who can support, the Yas Queen-ification of Kamala Harris. And on that front, obviously that split screen we've been talking about, I mean, how could he possibly compare to someone like J.D. Vance, one of the only people in the elites who cares about the forgotten American?
So let's go back to you. It's 2005. Instead of going with the unit and being the command sergeant major in Iraq, he quits. And what happens next to you and the other guys you're serving with?
Well, in the fall of '04, just stepping back a little bit, when the selection process was done, I was selected to a position in Divardi, which is Division Artillery, which is, he was selected into one of the 125 Field Artillery Battalion, which I was a member. We were both first sergeants together. So, I went one way. I went to Divardi to Division. He stayed in the 125. And then when the warning order came out, the 125 ended up being part of the 1st Brigade. So they were the ones that were notified that they were going to war. And I was at Division, and Division wasn't notified. So I was kind of like, well, it must not be my time. I'm in Division. I'm here. I'm just going to keep working. And, if Division gets activated, I'll go. But that's what happened with that at that point. So I wasn't in the 125 at that point, one of the 125 Field Artillery, and he was. So when 05 rolled around, he got notified. I mean, they all knew what was going to happen. I mean, it was right on the documents. It was going to be Iraq. The warning order was out there from March until May, and then May rolled around, and the rumor came out across the state that he had quit, turned his stuff in, and slithered down the steps out of the armory and had quit and retired. And everybody was in shock because senior NCOs don't do that. I mean, that you basically train for years and years. You're with your soldiers. Your soldiers are literally like your kids almost. I mean, you've watched them grow up. You've helped them shoot guns and learn how to do the radio stuff and, fix wounds if you can and different things. And then all of a sudden when it's time to go do your thing with that, you quit. I mean, that just absolutely was just disgusting. People were like, well, what is he, a coward, whatever. Nobody knew what the answer was. And I pretty much knew, well, I'll probably get the call because I'm a 13 Bravo artillery guy. And, then I got the call about not quite a month later. I mean, it was a few weeks, and then my colonel called, and it was just weird. I was out in one of my farm fields, and I was talking to him, and he's like, "Well, we're asking you to go," and then there was a horseshoe laid on the ground, and I always call it my lucky horseshoe. But other people said, "How can you say that's lucky? You went to war." And it was like, "Well, I got to serve my country in a greater capacity, and I got to help protect my soldiers and do whatever I could to make the deployment as good as it could be," because it was, like you said, it was a tough time in the country then.
So you went, and how long was the unit deployed for?
We were gone all the way until July of 2007. So when we started it was 22 months total. We had a 6-month train up at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and then we ended up, we're supposed to be a year in country. We're supposed to be an 18-month deployment, but then all the sectarian violence started in 06, late 06, and in January of 07, and we got extended to to help out. We were involved in the surge basically, but we were already in country, so they just kept us in place and moved more soldiers in to try to quell the violence.
Can you just give us a feel for how rough that time was? I remember covering it as a reporter. In 2006 was when the beheadings started. It just started to get very, very dark, even darker than you'd expect for war. You were there. So were the men who had served under him. He was supposed to be there, according to these documents. What was it like for you guys?
Well, when I got home, I kind of looked at some of our ground squirrels running around, and they're always on the alert. They're looking for a hawk to fly down or a badger to dig them out of the hole. I mean, you're always think you're going to die. Is about what it boils down. I mean, we didn't know really that we were going to get out of there until we got on the last Chinook to fly out, and even then there was stuff flying in the air at us, chasing us out of country almost. I mean, it was really a trying time, and they are a thinking enemy. I mean, Iran was behind all of the crap that was shot at us. I mean, it was from the explosive form projectiles to the mortars to the Katyusha rockets to the training of the people that went across the border and then came back and then used all those techniques and procedures against us. I mean, they literally were the people behind the scenes in our area. We were Shiite areas, so they were the the people killing us were the proxies of Iran. And when Donald Trump got rid of Salami or whatever his name was, he was the architect of all the people in my area that died. I mean, he has 3,000 people on his head, I think. But it was a rough time. I mean, we did what we could and kept everybody safe as much as we could. We drug out some old 120 millimeter mortars and shot them back at them, and kind of got them. They didn't like getting shot at, I'll tell you that much. That kind of put them on their toes. But
I'll bet. I know that you wrote in October of 18 on Facebook, you've been trying to raise this issue. I should point out, you've been trying to raise this issue since he first ran for Congress. Once he ran for governor, you tried to tell the media in Minnesota, you need to know the truth about him, that he left us. He quit. And almost nobody picked up the story. The papers that you sent your letter to wound up endorsing him, like the Star Tribune, and ignoring you. And so this is the first time you're really getting, I think, a national audience to say what you say is the truth about Governor Walz, and Alpha News confirms. You posted something in 2018 when he ran for governor, along with two others, with another retired Army Command Sergeant Major who is named Paul Herr. And before posting the letter, you wrote a message on why you wanted to bring this story out. It reads in part as follows. On 9/11, as I lowered the flags to half-staff at the Brewster Veterans Memorial, I gazed at the bronze likeness of Sergeant Kyle Miller, who was killed in action in Iraq on June 29th, 2006, at age 19 while serving in the 125th Field Artillery Battalion. I wondered what that patriot thought that day in 2001, a teenager in school, and I wondered what all the other patriots who had joined the service after 9/11 thought on that day. When they joined, we were at war, which we still are, and getting the call to go is probably going to happen. What if everybody said, sorry, I've got better things to do? We are the land of the free because of the brave. We are not the land of the free because of those who ran. The citizens of the state of Minnesota deserve to hear this side of the story, not just a slithery politician's version of what he wants people to hear. Do you feel, Tom, that he cut and ran, that he abandoned the unit?
Absolutely. I look back on what took place then. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, I just happened to get out and then a week later the paper came out and the warning order came out and I just happened to time it just right and I knew that was going to happen. I mean, the warning order was already out. Everybody knew they were going, and I don't know if he's never responded why to anybody really, except that, well, I had to quit to run for Congress, which is a lie, like a lot of the other ones. a lot of the lies he tells. I mean, but he basically said that. But, I don't know if he was a coward when he originally did it, or if he felt, well, I'm in over my head. If I go there, I'm going to get people killed, or maybe deep down he felt I'm incompetent. I mean, you can't talk your way out of somebody shooting at you in a scenario like that. And, he's very good at talking and doing that. I mean, I got to give him credit there. He loves hearing himself talk, but I don't know, and on the end of it, I think the reason he quit was political, because it was, back then, one side was it was George Bush's war, and it was an unjust war, and why were we there, and all this stuff, when it was like, I think the bottom line is maybe it's all of the above. Maybe there is some cowardice in there too, but that was the thing. It was like we were there, and I was at a huge bunker complex where there was bunkers that were blown all to pieces, but then there were some that were locked yet. And I told the EOD, explosive ordnance disposal guy, I said, well, maybe there's weapons of mass destruction in there. And he said, well, I ain't open up. He said, I got enough work to do cleaning all these rounds that are laying all over the desert out there. And it was like, well, where's the media when it comes to this? I mean, they didn't show any of that, but I mean, there was all kinds of possibilities that there was more there than anybody said, but everything got skewed then, and it was like an unjust thing, and I think that's the bottom line. But yeah, he literally, when I looked into, the Star Tribune reporter I talked to way back when, he actually said, well, isn't that treason? And I said, well, treason is probably one level over and above what he did. I said, because that's selling the country out to another nation. If you're a double agent spy or something, I mean, that's one thing. But, he is a traitor, because a traitor is basically a person who betrays a country, and that is what he did. And then I got thinking about it, about like that Bergdahl guy that just walked away from his unit in Afghanistan, and it was like, that literally is what Tim Walz did. He is a deserter too. It's a different version of it, but a soldier who leaves or runs away from service or duty with the intention of never returning. That is exactly what he did. He had no intention of ever coming back into guard or filling out one more day in combat boots. When he pulled the plug and was gone, he basically said, tough crap, United States, I'm getting the heck out of here. And yeah, that's I'm not ashamed to call him a traitor or a deserter.
We have got to get what's happening over in Paris with the Olympics and this boxer. I don't know about you, but I was flabbergasted at the amount of gaslighting going on in the media and by the IOC about the true sex of these two boxers who are competing in women's boxing. They're male. You trust me. I believe you trust me. You wouldn't be listening to this show. They're male. They have XY chromosomes. They have testes. That's male. Period. The IOC doesn't deny it, and we'll get to exactly how they're trying to thread the needle, but that's what you need to know. These are men competing as women. They're not trans, from what we understand. They suffer what's called DSDs, and that's a different thing, which we'll get into, but I'm going to walk you through it, okay? I'm going to give you the facts you need to know, but a little bit of background for you. First, the IOC has been aware of this problem in women's boxing for years, and it's done nothing because its number one goal is, quote, inclusion. And it's made that clear. It's woke. It doesn't care about women's safety or women's fairness. It just cares about making the trans or the DSDs feel welcome and safety of women be damned. But this particular case has escalated the matter because it's now in combat sports. Leah Thomas was bad enough. That was swimming, but he was in his own lane. Now we're actually endangering women. This has been banned in sports like rugby, because that's another combat sport. And the entity that controls boxing for women, the International Boxing Federation, has also said this is a no-go and disqualified these two athletes before. And they notified the IOC that these are males, and the IOC ignored it. Its only response has been to attack the Boxing Federation and to say, hands over the ears, it's not true, we're just not going to listen. They have female written on their passports. It's insane what they're doing. Let me kick it off with what we heard from Mark Adams, who's the IOC comms director, last week when this controversy first erupted with the boxer from Nigeria. There's another one from Taiwan. Take a listen to him, SOT 21.
They are women in their passports, and it's stated that is the case, that they are female. They're competing in the women's category. Again, I don't want to mention their names or whatever, but these athletes have competed many times before for many years.
Okay, so they're female, because he says they're female. By the way, Algeria, not Nigeria. And they've competed as females for many years. He skips over the part where they were disqualified from Worlds in 2023 for being men. Okay, so basically they got away with it for a number of years, therefore they are female. That doesn't hold up. It got to the point where the organization that oversees women's boxing, the International Boxing Association, felt the need to come out publicly and say the IOC is misleading you. And this just happened over the weekend. And they explained this past weekend that this thing started in Turkey in May of 2022 when they were in competition. Tests were taken and they said the results were inconsistent with femaleness. Next thing they knew, they had championships in 2023 in New Delhi, India. The World Championships come in New Delhi, India. Female World Championships. There were 324 boxers from 64 nations. It was a 10-day competition. And Taiwan's Lin Yoting and Algeria's Megyn Kelly were two of those 324 boxers. Now, they and others, this is not that uncommon. It's not common, but it's not unheard of for people participating in this sport and others like it to be concealing that they suffer from what are called DSDs, suspected differences of sexual development. Differences of sexual development. We used to use the term hermaphrodite. Then they changed it to intersex. Now they go by DSDs. And what it means in this case is you're someone who's a male, you have XY chromosomes and testes, but you don't have descended testes, and sometimes you don't have a penis. But then when you hit puberty, something might start growing. But there's no doubt that in the vast majority of these cases, the guy knows he's a guy, at least by the time he hits puberty. And certainly these two know because they had an XY chromosome test done repeatedly, including a blood test, according to the officials in that World Championships, that told them they're men. They know. They, according to the experts, would not have any female interior, internal organs. No uterus, no ovaries, no fallopian tubes. There'd be no period, no breast would grow, and that's consistent with what our eyes show us when we see these two compete. But they do have male testes that usually are undescended, so when they are born, they may look female in the genitalia, and therefore many of them are raised as girls in the beginning by well-meaning families who don't understand what they have here. And then it becomes apparent later on as they continue to look more and more like boys, and then they hit puberty, and often the testes do descend, and something approaching a penis could start growing. And all of that deserves empathy and understanding and kindness and non-bullying. And I think we're all there. However, it gets a lot trickier when they enter female sports, especially combat sports, and then remain in them after they know. Because this is not a question of elevated testosterone. They have perfectly normal testosterone for men. For men. They haven't done anything to manipulate their testosterone. It's not a matter of doping, in a way. It's a matter of biology. And this would be the same thing as an Olympian going and competing in the Paralympics. That's not allowed. They have able bodies, and you can't compete against people who don't have those same physical advantages. It would be unfair. We would recognize it clearly in that context. We choose not to here because the IOC is woke. Let me go back to the facts. They were asked to take these further blood tests. They did. They demonstrated chromosomes. This is from the IBA, International Boxing Association presser, that we refer to as ineligible results. That was further ratified and they were removed. He said, we've got a document that was sent to both boxers, refers to the blood test. We're not able to give the actual blood test results here due to medical privacy, but both boxers signed our letter to show receipt. They had seen the XY. Both had the opportunity to appeal. The Taiwanese fighter chose not to appeal, but Megyn Kelly did appeal. And he said, we had further discussions with Iman and we paid for most of that appeal, but Iman dropped it. And therefore, it was never actually adjudicated. Now I ask you, if you were an actual female, why would you drop your appeal? You were deprived of boxing in the gold medal round. You had made it through all the other rounds. You're about to fight for gold, and they DQ you for being male, and you drop the appeal. Why? Why isn't that in all the reporting? Wired. You've been absolutely disgusting. You're a tech magazine. For the love of God, stick to writing about computers because you don't know shit about fairness in sport. The IBA then sent a letter to the International Olympic Committee on June 5th, 2023, informing them of the test results. Summary: abnormal. Interpretation: chromosomal analysis reveals male karyotype, which means chromosome. Male chromosomes have been found. What happens with the IOC? They come out and double down. They don't care. They couldn't care less that the Boxing Federation is saying they're men. We tested, it's a blood test, and we told the IOC. Here is the IOC, again trying to gaslight us. Thomas Bach, the worst. He's the president of the IOC on Saturday.
Let's be very clear here. We are talking about women's boxing. And we have two boxers who are born as women, who have been raised as women, who have a passport as a woman, and who have competed for many years as women. And this is the clear definition of a woman. There was never any doubt about them being a woman. And how can somebody being born, raised, competed, and having a passport as a woman cannot be considered a woman?
That man sitting there knows that they tested positive via blood test for XY chromosomes. He's a liar. He's got an agenda. Moreover, the IOC at that presser came out, the same guy, and said, I repeat, this is not a DSD case. It's not a DSD case. Okay, so he's trying to say, no, they're not intersex, etc. This is about a woman taking part in a women's competition, and I think I've explained this many times. Guess what happened after the presser? The IOC had to issue a paper correction. The correction reads as follows. He said, I repeat here, this is not a DSD case. What was intended was, I repeat here, this is not a transgender case. That's it right there. That's the admission. It's a DSD case, which we know because they have XY chromosomes. They are men. It's not about elevated testosterone. It's about them being actual men, XY chromosomes, which you cannot get around. The doctor for the IOC, who's on the board of it, it's not the IOC, the International Boxing Federation, Dr. Ioannis Philippatos came out and said it explicitly. Listen to this. Slot 17.
I'm trying to say that the medical result, lab result, looks and says in the laboratories that this boxer is male.
Okay, that was incomprehensible, but I read what he said, and what he said was that we looked at the blood tests and the laboratories, these boxers are male. So he gave it up, even though the first guy who spoke for the IBF was like, oh, we can't be specific because of privacy. Then on comes the doctor, who's a board member for the Boxing Federation, and says, they're men. You've got, not for nothing, but a guy named Alan Abramson, award-winning sports writer, prior sports columnist for NBC News, saying he's seen the test himself and the letter, which the IBA concluded showed the boxers were male, and said it shows that Megyn Kelly has the DNA, which is that of a male consisting of XY chromosomes. The lab results for each athlete depict the XY chromosomes photographically, and on it goes. The proof is overwhelming, and the IOC was told. There is no way around this. I am sorry that these two got all the way to the medal rounds now. They're both guaranteed to medal because they've been beating women over and over, and they did so well that they're going to win. I'm sorry that they were allowed to do that and were falsely led to believe it would be okay. It's not okay. It's not okay. The one woman who was defeated by one of these over the weekend, you saw her hold up the XX with the fingers, XX, trying to say, I'm a woman. This is a woman's competition. And that's how it must remain if we are going to protect the safety of American women and all the other women who have to go into this already dangerous sport. This is not one of the risks they assume. Look at her, right on. But you know what really needs to be done? I'm sorry, don't box. The Italian woman who was defeated by Megyn Kelly last weekend, she wound up issuing an apology. Charlie Kirk predicted it. An apology for speaking out against him. If the IOC let him play, I guess it's fair. Well, no, it's not fair. And I'm sorry, I guess these women have to worry about blowback to themselves, but they should also be worrying about the women who come up behind them, because they too are in danger and someone's going to get killed. The Boxing Federation and the boxing officials who've been polled, one of the old female world champions, former, said Megyn Kelly's not even a very good boxer. He's winning because he's male, and female pronouns are inappropriate in this context. The co-founder of the Independent Council on Women's Sports condemned the IOC. The cover-up and championing of male athletes in women's Olympic sports is the greatest sports scandal of our lifetime. Heads must roll within the IOC to account for this unthinkable justice against women. Couldn't have said it better myself. Do you guys ever hit news of the day with each other? Is it chummy in that way?
Megyn, you're not going to be surprised that you're not going to get me to talk about politics during a presidential election year. We often eat lunch together. It's true. It's the government, so bring your own lunch. Sure, we'll talk about everything from baseball to politics to when Justice Breyer's around, some pretty bad knock-knock jokes that he gets from his grandkids.
Is it like when we all go home for Thanksgiving and we have leftists and rightists and conservatives, Republicans, everybody, liberals, debating these kinds of things over the potato salad? Or is it, I would imagine it's a little bit more elevated than that.
Well, it's certainly like a family. There are 9 people. We work together for long periods of time. We do easy things and we do hard things together. And I always think it'd be nice if the American people could take a peek at our discussions in the conference room. Now, I'm glad they don't, because it gives us an opportunity to speak candidly with one another and work through difficult problems. But I think they'd be very proud of the level of discourse and the thoughtfulness that goes around that conference table. We have a rule. We speak in seniority, and everybody goes around the table and says their piece before any further discussion. And then it's just a conversation back and forth. And it's amazing how often that conversation yields something that we can all agree on. And that becomes our starting place for our work.
Is it true that you all shake hands with all of the other justices every time you see each other?
That's a 150-year-old tradition, Megyn. And yes, we do. And I think that's a wonderful icebreaker for us. And for all people, right? No matter how difficult the matter of the day is, no matter what disagreements we might have had yesterday, we're always greeting one another with a warm welcome and a question about their family or what they've been up to over the summer. And yes, it's a great tradition.
It's really nice. I think about it sometimes in church where, it's time for to say peace and make peace with your neighbors. And I appreciate the return of the handshake, like human touch in congregation with your neighbors, even strangers to you, but with whom you have a common belief. There's something to it. And you hit on this in the book, like that tradition of going to church, some of the themes of bowling alone. That's really kind of interestingly part of the problem in the knee-jerk over-regulation of everything.
Well, now, Megyn, I'm a lawyer, so I like laws. And, I think they're very important to our freedoms, right? Without them, we can't be safe. We don't know what our responsibilities and our rights are without laws. But, James Madison a long time ago asked the question, all right, some law is essential, but is there an irony in law? And can there be too much law in ways that actually hurt our freedoms and our aspirations for equality and our rights? And I just as a judge now for about 18 years, I've just seen so many cases in which decent, hardworking Americans just trying to make their way, just getting overrun by laws that they didn't know about. And I felt it was important to take a moment to just tell their stories. I've reflected on it for a long time, and many of them were kind enough to share their stories with Janie, my co-author and former law clerk, and me. And the book really is about them, and it's dedicated to them, and it's their stories mostly.
It's incredible the way that you've chosen to approach it. And Janie obviously is brilliant, because I'm sure she did the bulk of the research, and the stories are spectacular, the ones that you've chosen. Just to put a little, header on it for the audience, you pose the central question of the book as follows. What happens, this is my phrase, to the little guy and their foundational freedoms, like the right to speak, the right to pray, the right to gather freely, when our laws increasingly restrict what we may say, they monitor what we do, and tell us how we may live? And you write in the book about how rich people with connections, or popular people, they'll do okay. If you look at history, it's when the unpopular or unconnected, unwealthy guy or gal gets dragged into the courts that all of this regulation becomes a problem. And you feature front and foremost the story of Sandra and John Yates. I told my family the story. We're still talking about it. Even my kids were completely baffled by what happened to John Yates. Can you outline it for us quickly?
Sure. So John and Sandra Yates are high school sweethearts. They moved to Florida. He pursued his life's dream of becoming a commercial fisherman, worked his way up from deckhand to captain of his own small crew. And he's out one day. Somebody comes alongside, flashes a badge, and says, "I'd like to measure your fish." John says, "Well, we've been out for some time, and I've got thousands of pounds of red grouper in the hold." He says, "Fine, I got all day." And he sits there measuring the red grouper one by one. And he determines that there are 72 fish that are less than 20 inches long, the limit at the time. Now, John's not convinced this fellow knows how to measure red grouper, because he doesn't account for their long lower jaw like he should. But put that aside, 72 it is. The agent says, "Put those in a crate, and I'll deal with you when you get back to dock in a few days." John does that. Well, when he gets back, the agent measures them again and finds 69 now, not 72, that are undersized, and he's suspicious. But John doesn't hear anything more about it for 3 years, when a group of agents surround his house, his wife's doing the laundry, and arrest him, take him 2 hours away. He has no idea what this is about. And he's charged with a violation of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which was, as you know, adopted after the Enron accounting scandal. And it's designed to prevent people from destroying documents when there's a federal investigation. But the law reads, you can't destroy things like accounting records and spreadsheets and other tangible objects. And the government's Sarbanes-Oxley theory is that John had thrown overboard 72 undersized red grouper and replaced them with 69 still undersized red grouper. And John thought that was about the silliest thing he'd ever heard. But they pursued the case even after the size limit for red grouper was dropped to 18 inches, and all of his fish, by anyone's estimation, were longer than that. They spent years pursuing him, secured a conviction. He spent 30 days in jail over Christmas when he and his wife were trying to raise 2 young grandchildren. And he was ready to give up. He was done. And Sandra said, "No, we have to fight this for the next person so it doesn't happen to someone else again." She took it all the way to the United States Supreme Court and won by a single vote. Now, that kind of spirit I admire, but look at the costs that it came to that family. John was no longer able to pursue his life's dream as a commercial fisherman, put out of work. His wife now supports the family, and they live in a trailer. So that's the human toll of too much law, right? And it's something that's happened in my lifetime, Megyn. I don't know about yours, but our laws have just simply exploded. The federal criminal code has more than doubled in my lifetime in length. There are so many federal crimes now in regulatory provisions that nobody can be sure, because it would take years just to read them. There are at least 300,000, we know. And, everybody says Congress isn't busy. They write 2 to 3 million new words of statutory law every year. And the federal regulations, forget about Congress. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The Federal Register used to be 16 pages long when it started in the 1930s. Now, every year, we see 60 to 70,000 pages added annually.
This John's wife, Sandra, is really the heroine of the book.
I agree.
She brought this case, notwithstanding the enormous challenges to doing that when you don't have a lot of money. As you point out, it lasted 8 years, 3 courts, 13 different judges. And John was forced to do the time and pay the price, even though he was ultimately successful at the U.S. Supreme Court. You point out in the book, all of this is very contrary to the founders' vision of what America would be about. And you say that one of the essential purposes in our founding documents, as recognized by Justice William O. Douglas, was to take government off the backs of the people and to keep it off. And somehow that's been turned on its head with the numbers that you just espoused, that by 100 years ago, all the federal government laws fit into a single volume. This is all from the book Overruled. By 2018, U.S. Code was 54 volumes, 60,000 pages. There are 300,000 federal agency regulations, many of which have criminal penalties, and on and on. It's just spun out of control to where no one could ever understand what all the laws are out there and how many we violate in a day.
Yeah, some people say, some academics say that anyone over the age of 18 in this country could be charged with a federal felony. And that does raise a lot of questions in my mind, right? Our founders wanted for us written laws. They wrote a constitution. That was a novel idea in human history at the time. And it was designed to divide and check and balance power and make lawmaking difficult. We forget that. They saw law as restrictions on freedoms. And so they wanted lawmaking to be an especially difficult task. And that's why we have 2 houses of Congress, why you have to then get the president to sign it or override his veto. And we've kind of taken that process where we're supposed to have the wisdom of the masses, all the people involved, their representatives coming together, compromising, working through problems, and passing laws that we can all maybe understand and agree on. We've outsourced a lot of that work to federal agencies where there are experts and they have very important contributions to make, but there aren't the kinds of checks and balances that Madison had in mind for us.
Yeah, they're not elected. And as you point out in the book Overruled, they often not only will be the promulgators of these basically criminal statutes that we're going to have to abide by, but then they're the judge and jury too. They will create the regulation, they'll charge us with violating it, and then they'll try the case, and surprise, surprise, they're not the most objective judge.
Well, when Janie and I sat down to work on the book, we wondered how many federal agencies there are, Megyn. And it turns out federal agencies can't agree on how many federal agencies exist. There are at least 3 different published numbers of how many of them there are. And you're right, they write rules, very important work. They prosecute people for violations of those rules. And then in many cases, they serve as the judge for the case too. Jonathan Turley, professor at George Washington, says that the average American is 10 times more likely to be brought before one of these administrative judges. They used to be called hearing officers, but now they call themselves administrative judges. Great. Than an American is likely to ever face a judge and a jury. And what's at stake there? Why do we care about this? Why do we write about this in the book? Well, when you're before a judge, you're before somebody who is pretty independent, who's been appointed and confirmed and been through that process, but after that doesn't owe anything to anybody, right? His only job or her job is to apply the law as faithfully and fairly as they can. And you have a jury of your peers to decide your case. Before an agency, your administrative judge or administrative law judge is likely to be somebody who works for the very same agency that's bringing the charges against you. You're not going to have a jury. And many of the procedures that you'd get in court, including basic rights like cross-examination, are not always given to you the way they would be in court. It's a very, very different system. And it's unsurprising as a result that agencies almost always win before their own judges in ways that they wouldn't win in court.
That fierce independence of the judiciary is going to come back into this discussion as we get into some of the criticisms of the courts these days and the push to make them more accountable, and whether that's also inconsistent with the founders' vision. You go through, you do an excellent job of outlining the problem in terms of the volume of law, the impossibility of understanding the laws, real man and women stories of how it's impossible to navigate the system and how people have gotten caught in this web. But I do want to tick through a couple of the passing references because they bring it home. Justice Gorsuch goes through the 6-year-old you may have heard of who landed in court for picking a tulip by the bus stop, 10-year-old whose lemonade stand was shuttered for lack of a business license. We talked about those kids all the time when I was on Fox. It's a federal crime to enter a post office while intoxicated. There goes my Saturday night. To sell a mattress without a warning label. I never knew that was real. We all rip those off of our mattresses thinking that's a joke. To injure a government-owned lamp in D.C. and, absurdly, to consult with a known pirate, which is right on point. Who spends their time coming up with this stuff, never mind enforcing it?
Well, that's the thing. I used to think those were like stray anecdotes. And then I started seeing them in my courtroom. When I was a 10th Circuit judge, I had a case, I think it was a 7th grader, certainly a middle schooler, who was trading burps for laughs in his classroom. And I might have been guilty of that in the day. And instead of being just taken to the principal's office, or maybe his parents called, or maybe detention, he was arrested and handcuffed. And it went to court. Now, I don't know what's happening in our society that leads to things like that. Another one, a small healthcare company in Kansas was accused of Medicare fraud. Big, big deal. That's the kind of thing that can put your company out of business. And it went through 6 years of those kinds of administrative law proceedings we talked about a moment ago, got to my court. And the three of us, we sit in panels of 3 on the courts of appeals usually. We looked at each other and said, I think they complied with all the rules that were in existence at the time they provided their services. And the government's accusing them of violating rules that it didn't even promulgate until years after they provided the services. Are we missing something? And we got the government lawyer in front of us and heard argument. And it turned out the government had just become confused. It was producing so many rules so fast. It had no idea that it was accusing somebody for violating rules that didn't even exist at the time.
The theme I see out of the book, again, Overruled, is these government entities overreact to problematic behavior, minor problematic behavior, and they punish good or neutral behavior over and over and over. There's so many examples in the book, but one of them that our audience may be familiar with is Hemingway's cats down at his estate, which some regulator deemed a problem. Everyone was perfectly happy. No one was suffering, but then they were once the regulators stepped in.
Yeah, so there's this law that said that if you're an animal exhibitor, like a zoo or a circus, you have to have a federal license for your animals. Fine. Then the agency took that and kind of ran with it and said, basically, animal exhibitors include everybody from children's magician, Marty Hahn. I talk about him in the book too.
That's a crazy story. Poor guy.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. But the Hemingway Museum, turns out they needed a federal license. And somebody from the U.S. Department of Agriculture went down there and said, okay, you have these cats. They're all descendants of Ernest Hemingway's original 6-toed cat that he got from a ship captain as good luck. And they've been taking care of them for years down there. They even stay during hurricanes to make sure the cats are okay. And they have a little cat cemetery with tombstones. I mean, these cats are loved. And they're all named like Marilyn Monroe and Cary Grant. And at any rate, this person from the Department of Agriculture says, you got a problem taking care of these cats because the wall isn't tall enough, so the cats kind of wander into town. People love them, but you got to keep them in, and so you got to put the wall higher. And the museum said, well, we'd love to, but there's another federal agency that says we're a historical site and we can't change the wall. So, all right. Then the agent said, well, maybe you need to put a hot wire on top of that wall. So they put the hot wire in, and of course that fried the cats.
Oh my
God. And the agency got very angry about that. And the museum said, well, hold on, you guys are the experts. We're just trying to do. Anyway, they went through 3 rounds of applying for permits. The American government spent hundreds of thousands of dollars sending agents to Key West. They rented an apartment across from the museum, took surreptitious photos. They're labeled like "could be a cat from Hemingway Museum" on them. And PETA did a study. They brought in PETA, and PETA said they saw a bunch of fat and happy cats down there. It took years, and ultimately, of course, it got resolved. But the museum tried to fight it and said this regulation is too broad an interpretation of the statute. They fought it all the way to the 11th Circuit and lost. The 11th Circuit said, you got a pretty good reading of the statute there, but there's something called Chevron deference, which requires us to favor the agency when there's any question about how best to read the statute. So you lose.
Mm-hmm. And you point out too, I want to get to Chevron, but in New York City, for an example, opening a restaurant in New York, citing a New York Times article, you'd have to go through 11 city agencies, often with conflicting regulations, get up to 30 permits, registrations, licenses, and certificates, and pass 23 different inspections. That's exactly the kind of bureaucracy that they were running into down at the Hemingway Museum, where they just wanted to love these cats and not electrify them or electrocute them. Same thing as the poor magician who had similar problems. You got to read the book to find out his story, Marty Hain, where he's just trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat. And if he wanted to pull an iguana out of the hat, he could have done whatever he wanted to it. But ultimately, they were actually getting down to the nitty gritty of, well, if a tornado comes, the cat needs to go into the holding shelter first before the dogs and cat. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. Megyn, when he had he got whacked just like the people at the Hemingway Museum. An agent came up when he was doing a show, children's show, and pulled the rabbit out of the hat and said, do you have a license for that? And he said, no. Do I need a license? I mean, he's a law-abiding guy. He wants to do it right. And they told him if it's an iguana, you don't need one. And if it were rabbit meant for stew, that's okay. You don't need one. But for the children's show, you need a federal license. And he got one, of course. And then, later after Hurricane Katrina, they said, well, now you need to have an emergency preparedness plan. And, for chemical spills and hurricanes and all manner of disasters. And he had to hire a disaster management expert to help him write a 28-page disaster management. He lives in Missouri.
Oh my.
He says, we do have one thing I'm worried about, and that's tornadoes. And my plan is to get the family in the basement, then the dog and the cat. And if there's time, I'll get the rabbit. And of course, the agent, no, I don't care about the dog or the family or the rabbit's got to go first. He even had a home visit. He had a home visit when they wanted to see, how he carries the rabbit to the shows, and he showed him the cage. And the agent said, well, now how do you know which way is up when you carry the rabbit? And Marty says, well, I've got a handle. I carry it from the handle. And they said, no, you have to have one of those stickers that says this way up on it. And he said, well, where do I get some? And the agent said, well, I'll send you some. And 2 weeks later, he got 200 stickers in the mail, thanks to your tax dollars.
It's so, we have to laugh because it's truly just absurd, but it's one of those laugh or cry situations. You know of all these cases because they wound their way through the judicial system. These people were forced to defend themselves against an overreaching federal government that does not understand those founding principles of how limited it was supposed to be and how we formed the whole country because we didn't want that boot on our neck inside of our homes. And when we do a magic show, not everything has to be overregulated. And one of the examples that's the most heartbreaking in the book, not the least of which, because we actually went there for a short time during the COVID lockdown, was what happened in Butte, Montana. It's where you may not know this, Justice. Rob O'Neill, the guy who shot bin Laden, is from Butte, Montana. And boy, I've talked to him many times, but I've never talked to him about the history of his hometown and how this government overregulation stopped people from helping themselves.
Yeah. So Butte, Montana, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, was one of the richest places on the planet. They discovered copper there. And the wires for our telegraphs, our telephones, bullets for World War I, they came from Butte, Montana. It was so important in World War I that Omar Bradley was sent there to guard it. And of course, over time, the plant closes, the smelters close, and it becomes it's a tough place to grow up these days, economically. And they also discovered that that smelter had poured a lot of arsenic into the air that had settled on the land. 300 square miles around Butte became a Superfund site. And EPA did a good job with industry trying to clean it up. But they set the acceptable arsenic ranges to be left in the soil at 250 parts per million in residential yards. And in many municipalities today, you cannot put anything in a landfill that's greater than 100 parts per million. And about 100 people in Butte said, wow, I don't feel comfortable with 250 parts per million. Where did this come from, and can we do better than that? And EPA said, well, we think that's an acceptable cancer range, that 250. And the people of Butte said, well, we'd like to clean up our own land or get this company to help us do better. I mean, we're talking about daycares and kids' backyards. And of course, the industry fought it, fair enough. But EPA came in on the side of industry, and they said that federal law preempted any efforts by the states to clean up the land, or even by the people themselves in Butte, Montana, without EPA's permission. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we held that the law was exactly as EPA and the industry read it. I dissented, but I admit my colleagues had a pretty strong reading of the law. I guess my question just is, suppose that is what the law is. Is that how it should be? What do we think? Of course, environmental regulation is very important. And maybe if there had been some earlier, we wouldn't have had the problem that we had in Butte. But at the same time, while expertise is important and Washington regulation is important, isn't the local knowledge of Butte also important? Aren't those people entitled to think about cleaning up their own land without asking people 3,000 miles away in Washington for permission?
Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and today's weekend best of special episode. Election day is Tuesday, so you can imagine how busy last week was, but no one could have predicted how totally bizarre the week ended up being. President Joe Biden stepped on Kamala Harris's closing message rally by calling Trump supporters garbage. I had Charlie Kirk on the next day to talk about it. And then former President Donald Trump leaned into it, jumping in a garbage truck branded with his campaign logo. Stu Burgier and Stephen L. Miller, Red Steez as he's known, were on to break down the hilarious and authentic moment. Meantime, billionaire Jeff Bezos is feuding with his own newspaper and how, the Washington Post, over his decision to stop the Post from publishing a Kamala Harris endorsement. Glenn Beck, my friend, was on with me to talk about it. And then we had Spencer Kimball, director of Emerson Polling, to break down exactly what we're seeing in the final days of this race. Enjoy and see you Monday. Unbelievable what happened last night. I'm going to get you to react, but let me just play Joe Biden's comments and what he said right after she spoke.
Donald Trump has no character. He doesn't give a damn about the Latino community. He's failed businessman. He only cares about the billionaire friends he has and accumulating wealth for those at the top. He says immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. Give me a break. He wants to do away with the birthright citizenship. Who the hell has said that in the last 100 years? And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done.
Charlie Kirk, thoughts?
Well, first of all, isn't it great to be here, Megyn? Thank you. Isn't it fitting that the man that they hid from us for 3 years for obviously having mental decline is just redeployed a week out from the election during Kamala's speech, by the way, and completely undermined? I could not tell you really anything she said other than Trump bad, unify the country, all the headlines trending on Twitter, 1.2 million tweets, just everybody talking about the fact the current president of the United States calls half the country, myself included, garbage. So let's break this down. And I mean this sincerely. Has there ever been an instance in American history where a sitting president openly calls half the country that he is tasked to govern trash, garbage, worthy of discarding? Has that ever happened in American history? Ever? And if somebody has an example, I would love to see that example. I don't even think during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln called the Confederacy that. I mean, I do not even think during the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln called the people of the Confederacy garbage. In fact, I think Abraham Lincoln said, these are still our fellow citizens and brother against brother, and it's a tragedy we're fighting them. And so we've never seen this language ever in American history. I'd love a historian to dig that up if it's happened before. It's number one. Number two, which is that this is what they deserve. They deserve that this man that they force-fed us as president of the United States 4 years ago in that ridiculous election of 2020 when he was in the basement and there was mail-in ballots everywhere that were not being checked and there was $400 million from Mark Zuckerberg. They deserve the guy that they forced on the American people to all of a sudden come back a week out from the election. And there's so many other points to kind of go through here, but this is not a gaffe. This is a stated policy position. They do think that we're garbage. Not just from their rhetoric, but from how they treat us. Look at how they treated the hurricane victims. I'm in North Carolina right now. How they treated the hurricane victims in North Carolina versus foreigners. You treat garbage that way. Look at how that they are trying to import another 10 million people and destroy the purchasing power of our dollar. You treat garbage that way. And Joe Biden did not say something by mistake. He was caught saying something that he meant that he wished he would not have said. And that's a very important distinction. And so this now takes all the headlines in a way that only you could explain that either God or luck or something. I think it happens to be God as on Trump's side because the news cycle was just annoying after MSG, Megyn. We were talking about this comedian's joke and it was all about garbage. And now it's completely in the opposite direction. Joe Biden took what was an annoying 48 hours news cycle after Trump had basically unbroken momentum from McDonald's and Rogan and all of his great campaigning to kind of, okay, we got to now cover for some comedian. And that is another point I want to make just very quickly. The media freaked out about a comedian not running for office, saying an off-color joke. I didn't like the joke. You didn't like the joke. I thought it was the wrong time or place or manner for that. This guy's a sitting president of the United States and is running the country, allegedly, and is the mentor and the boss of the person running for the job. And the media, their coverage was like, well, Joe Biden appears to attack Donald Trump supporters as garbage, or right-wingers get very upset about Joe Biden's comments about them as garbage. So this is now the closing argument. This is worse than deplorables, and I think this is going to do nothing but motivate people that might not have voted to go out and vote because the current administration hates you. They think you're worthy of discarding. They believe you're garbage.
Here's what's so amazing about it. It's a direct parallel. They just spent 2 days trying to tell us it is deeply offensive and wrong and an outrage and a votable issue to have somebody on one person's side call a group garbage. And the case they were making was about a comedian who was at MSG hours before Trump took the seat.
No real attachment. Yes,
but
exactly. Yes.
So they spent 2 days telling us if somebody affiliated with the other side calls a group of people garbage, that could be a single issue for you when you go into that ballot box. You must vote against that person. That's absolutely deeply offensive, racist, terrible, beyond the pale. And then what happens? Not some comedian who's warming up 4 hours before Kamala Harris gets out there. The sitting president of the United States, who's been her partner in all policy, from whom she sees no differences for the past 4 years, as she said repeatedly now over the past couple of weeks, gets out there and says, Trump supporters are the only garbage I see. And the media has absolutely no room to run There's no way of squaring those two positions. They must say this is deeply wrong and you cannot support a ticket that would have that kind of mentality about the American people. And yet they are in the Cirque du Soleil contortions to try to get away from it. We've got to talk about the apostrophe, right?
Oh, no, I was going to go there. No, the apostrophe is one of the greatest wrinkles of this whole story, Megyn. No, but please continue.
Amazing.
It is.
So
really
you get John, as near as I can tell, Jonathan Lemire is the first person to get the apostrophe. He is a complete hack, partisan, pathetic excuse for a quote journalist. He works for Politico, and he also is part of the MSNBC morning show, the show that precedes Morning Joe, but now he's being elevated to Morning Joe because his kind of hackery will get you a full-time role on that show. And he reaches out to his sources at the White House about this comment that we all watched Joe Biden make. He made it around 6 in the evening, but it didn't start circulating till later. And he gets the White House transcript, the official transcript of Biden's remarks calling Trump supporters garbage. And he goes with it. He says, this White House version of the transcript proves that the Biden quote is, quote, being taken out of context. And the transcript reads, the only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters, but it adds an apostrophe between the R and the S of supporters as if it's possessive. Like his supporter issued garbage like out of his mouth, and that's all I see. That is clearly not what Joe Biden said. And if you hear the cadence of the way he delivered it, that makes it clear. We should go back and listen to it again. Let's listen to it one more time.
Donald Trump has no character. He doesn't give a damn about the Latino community. He's failed businessman. He only cares about the billionaire friends he has and accumulating wealth for those at the top. He says immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. Give me a break. He wants to do away with the birthright citizenship. Who the hell has said that in the last 100 years? And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Well, let me tell you something. I don't know the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done.
And then just putting a period at the end of that, Charlie. So Lemire sells his soul and doesn't even pretend to be a real journalist. And then ultimately, because this blew up online, Biden puts out a statement that reads as follows. It's an X post. Of course, Jonathan Lemire shared it from Biden. Earlier today, I referred to the hateful rhetoric about Puerto Rico spewed by Trump's supporter at MSG as garbage, which is the only word I can think of to describe it. Okay, so he's trying to say, I was referring to that guy's hateful rhetoric. That's what I was calling garbage. And he says, his demonization of Latinos is unconscionable. That's all I meant to say, which is different than that's all I said. In here is an implicit admission that he said exactly what we heard him say. And what's remarkable today is, Charlie, the AP, many other like normal news sources or, left-leaning, Axios, CNN are not going along with Lemire's and Politico's spin. They're actually admitting they heard what we heard.
Yeah, I mean, we're half there. I have some of these headlines. Again, these people, they can't bring themselves to ever reporting the truth. I mean, let me just read some of these headlines. White House and Trump campaign clash over whether Biden called Trump supporters garbage. Okay, I mean, we're almost there, right? I mean, is that really the essence of the story of the Washington Post? Okay, CBS News, which is by like their entire team, Ed O'Keefe, Waija Jian, Olivia Rinaldi. Supporters apostrophe. Biden comments about Trump garbage rally anger the GOP. Do you see, this is what they do, if I have to say. If there's ever an injustice, they say right-wingers pounce, conservatives upset, as if we're like being some sort of unreasonable cohort. And then if we do something against them, or if there's some comedian, they say outrageous, racist, vile rhetoric spewed. Of course, I mean, that is the playbook. AP, Biden suggests Trump supporters are garbage, after comics insult to Puerto Rico. So they just have to add that in there, right? They have to just
of course.
make sure that's in, that's in the headline. So look, the possessive thing is amazing. I would have loved to have been in the White House comms room and the Kamala Harris campaign where they're trying to figure out how to spin this one. So they probably watched the tape and they're like, oh my gosh, we should have kept him in the basement, which is just a whole nother amazing wrinkle, right? I mean, is there some sort of quiet pro-Trump part of this? Again, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but this guy was not doing as many interviews. He was not doing this many interviews 4 years ago. He was a spring chicken 4 years ago. And he's completely not needed right now. And he's doing some Zoom call for Latinos concurrently while there is this like major closing argument just feet away from the White House at the Ellipse. And someone decides to go put you on some Voto Latino Zoom call where you're going to give off-the-cuff remarks about something that is helping your narrative. It's a little bit too suspicious for me. And so the other part is that the White House comms room with the Kamala Harris, they're like, okay, Joe said that, we can't say that he was, okay, how about if we add an apostrophe? Because MAGA is known to litter. That MAGA is really known to make the streets dirty. That it's their garbage. That if you go into MAGA neighborhoods, they're filthy. I mean, it's so repulsive. And here's what
Charlie,
it's doing now.
On that front, somebody on Twitter put out like all the Harris Biden brain trust sitting around thinking, what's the solution? What's the solution? And then somebody, if you can see, somebody does this. It's just a picture of an apostrophe. George, exactly. I've got it.
and it only makes the story bigger. And it only amplifies it more. And again, this is a turnout election now. We're seeing it in the numbers. This is not a persuasion election. Kamala's playing a persuasion election, which is highly risky. In the last week of the election, it's incredibly risky to antagonize and call the opposition names, fascists, Nazis, racist, garbage, all these things, because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction in politics, especially when you talk about turnout, and it can bring a lot of people more out to the polls that otherwise wouldn't have. So it's incredibly high risk. And so by doing this now, again, it started with an unfavorable, day and a half, kind of an annoying, I don't want to say unfavorable, it was annoying, okay, MSG, and then we have to talk about some comedian's thing who's not running for office, who's just happened to be on stage, okay. And now it's very real. This went from annoying to real to like, wow, the president thinks that half the country is garbage. And again, we have a tradition in this country, and this is what's so important, is Joe Biden, how many times did he have to say, well, I'm here to unify the country, and I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. It is all rubbish. We know this. It's now through rhetoric and action. They hate you. They want to discard you. And the most important point on this is that this dehumanizing language is what led to the worst atrocities of the 20th century. I'm not going to compare everything to Nazism. That's what the left does. But it is a fact. When you use this language that wide swaths of people are garbage, then you are in your mind, you're able to justify raiding their homes, taking their businesses away, spying on them, following them into Latin Mass, and doing some of the most grotesque things imaginable because they believe that we are worthy of being discarded, eliminated, or just disappeared.
Well, that's the thing, is like this really is a pattern for these Democrats. Yes. Kamala Harris's hands are dirty too. She may want to disassociate herself from Biden, as her supporters now, the guys from the Pod Save America, keep saying, oh, Biden's not running for president. He's not on the ticket. But her hands are just as dirty.
Tony Ratcliffe.
You've got Obama calling Republicans bitter clingers. You've got Joe Biden out with they're a bunch of garbage. You got Kamala Harris calling them fascists and Nazis. And you got Tim Walz, too, out there saying that was a Nazi rally that we watched at MSG. It was a bunch of Nazis. It wasn't, he got right up to it. I'll play you the double Tim Walz comments. Here are the original remarks.
Donald Trump's got this big rally going at Madison Square Garden. There's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden. And don't think that he doesn't know for 1 second exactly what they're doing there.
Direct parallel to the Nazi rally. And then he gets asked about it by a local reporter yesterday. Watch.
You said over the weekend, referring to it, there's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden.
Well, look,
you were comparing that rally to a Nazi rally?
Look, I'm comparing it to the hate that came out of this, and I think they confirmed that.
You stand by that comparison, though, to a Nazi rally?
Look, the rally, you saw it for yourself. I'll let the American public make the decision of what they saw.
What about you, though?
So I know what I saw, and I'll just leave it at that.
Doesn't disavow.
I
So
like
you got
that
bitter
journalist. Good
clingers,
for
you
him.
got deplorables. How did I forget Hillary? You got bitter clingers from Obama, you got deplorables from Hillary, you got fascists from Kamala, you got Nazis from Walz, and now you got garbage from Joe Biden. That is what the Democrats think of the right half of this country.
Yeah, and again, I'm not one to get overly excited with this because I think it's really dangerous, but this is how you get towards justifying eliminating people. And again, I hope we're not close to that in America. I really don't. But they're not trying to offer an olive branch and try to heal the country. They're basically saying that Charlie Kirk and people like me are worthy of gulags and worthy of concentration camps. And if I am wrong, somebody prove me wrong on this. Because Tim Walz had multiple opportunities there. And for him to irresponsibly and recklessly, and that journalist did a great job following up, kind of play cutesy with it. So at the MSG rally, what are they saying? Okay, that at a different location, that a bunch of Nazis held something in the 1930s. I guess when Bill Clinton accepted a nomination for the Democrat National Party in 1992 in Madison Square Garden, was that a Nazi rally? Because that's really a stupid argument. And by the way, half of that arena were like Orthodox Jews with Israeli flags. But no, it gets down. Here's the part of it is that this is all they have left. And you notice how they started with heavy emphasis on abortion. They're not doing that as much right now. Heavy emphasis on all of Trump's felony convictions. You don't hear that much right now. They have now gone to their final thing, which is, honestly, just call them a bunch of fascists and Nazis, and hopefully that will motivate our base. This is so poisonous to the political discourse. I don't know how we heal this, Megyn, other than these people need to be permanently displaced from power. They need to become permanently in the minority of this country and punished. And I mean punished electorally. Like, they need to go in timeout for the next 2 decades and learn a very harsh lesson that this country, the people that they call Nazis and clingers and fascists and garbage, are the people that make this country work. They protect this country. They clean this country. They love this country. They're the backbone of this country. And their utter contempt for the American people. I mean, if there is any justice left in this world, it will be met with a widespread repudiation this coming Tuesday.
Mm-hmm. It's stunning to me to watch the turnaround. And it's like, I look forward to watching these same journalists who purported to be so outraged about the comic's remarks try to justify this. I really do, because some of us were consistent. Some of us said this was not good. This was not an okay thing, rhetoric for a campaign, and called out even the comedian, and have a perfect line of consistency now that it's the president of the United States calling out half of the country, right?
Sitting president,
and by the way,
too.
here's the thing. The comic, he was doing what comedians do. He was making a joke. At a minimum, you have to give him that. He was making a joke. This isn't a sincerely held feeling by the comic. He was trying to get a laugh out of a group that didn't laugh, by the way. The Trump supporters didn't laugh. Joe Biden wasn't trying to get a laugh line, deliver one. This is his sincere feeling about the country, and it's shared. It's shared by his vice president, and it's shared by the man she would make her vice president.
Yeah, and Tony Ratcliffe doesn't have Tomahawk missiles. Like, Tony Ratcliffe doesn't control the U.S. military, okay? Like, Tony Ratcliffe can't just tell the Department of Justice to go after someone. Joe Biden can.
But I'm not worried about, maybe I'm crazy. I'm not worried about Joe Biden or Kamala Harris unleashing the military on us. I'm really not. I'm not worried about Trump doing that to the other side, and I'm not worried. But I am a little worried about what you would do to stop someone from winning if you think he's Hitler and his supporters are Nazis and garbage. Trump did the right thing and leaned in. He wore the garbage vest. He got in a garbage truck. He held a quick mini presser from the garbage truck. Here's a little bit of that in Stop 4.
I think the Democrats have done a very poor job. We're leading in every state. We're leading big, and I think that the comment made by really both of them, because there are really two of them, about being garbage, maybe 250 million people, They shouldn't be talking. That's like deplorable for Hillary. This is the deplorable for Hillary. And I think this is worse, actually. For Joe Biden to make that statement, it's really a disgrace. I love Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico loves me. I don't know anything about a comedian. I don't know anything about the comedian. I don't know who he is. I've never seen him. I heard he made a statement, but it was just a statement that he made. He's a comedian. What can I tell you? How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
So first of all, one of the great things about Trump that goes under-recognized is that he tells you exactly what he wants you to think. That's effective messaging. It's worse than Hillary's deplorables. It is worse than Hillary's deplorables. He wants that in your head. And the garbage thing, like it's that bad, like over and over telling you how you should think about it. That's the genius of Trump. And that picture right there of Trump in the garbage truck that reads Trump, Make America Great Again on the side 2024 with the American flag flying large and blowing in the wind from where he is. It's another iconic photo, just like the one of him in McDonald's. It is another iconic photo. So then Trump goes and holds his rally in Wisconsin, and he tells the story. This is just classic Trump of how this whole thing came about, the truck and the vest, which he is still wearing inside the rally arena while he tells the story.
And I come into the arena and I say, "Where's my jacket? I want to get out of this thing." And they said, "It would be unbelievable if you could wear it on stage." I said, "No way. I got 25,000 people standing outside. I got all these people here. There's no way I'm wearing it on stage." They said, "Oh, okay, sir." I said, "Get me my jacket. But if you did, it actually makes you look thinner." I said, and they got me. I said, "I want to wear it on stage." When they said I look thinner, I said, "In that case, I'll wear it on stage."
It's classic, vintage, right on point. And then he adds the following about the difficulty in getting up into one of those huge garbage trucks, which would be hard for most people. And, Trump's not exactly the slimmest man. And talked about how it was a little bit challenging for him.
So I said, "Man, if I don't get up there, this is going to be very embarrassing." These stupid people, they'll say, "He's cognitively and physically impaired." And I can't do that when I'm alongside of this great athlete. I got to get up to that. So look, the first stair is like up here. I'm saying, shit. So I had the adrenaline going and I made it. I made it. And then I gave a little news conference from the front of the, they asked their wise guy questions and everything. And then we drove about 2 feet. I got out, got into the plane.
So good, Stu.
I didn't know Hitler was so funny. I mean, that is a hilarious Nazi right there. It really is. I will say, if I was in the meetings before they started scheduling this thing, the McDonald's thing, you're going to go on stage in your garbage outfit, I think as a campaign advisor, I'd be like, "No, dude, please don't. You're going to look like Dukakis with his head out of the tank. It's going to be terrible." And there's just something about unique about Trump where he can pull these things off. I mean, this was endearing. He's a funny, endearing guy when he wants to be. And I think if you look back to 2016, Stephen kind of mentioned this earlier. If you go back to 2016, he was kind of this new guy, and he had his funny moments. He was still sort of an entertainer to most people. And then 2020 was sort of like, it was a little darker. It was more of an insult comic version of Trump at times. Right now, he's just got the vibe right. This is smart campaigning, putting him on these podcasts. It's where he shines. He's able to be honest and kind of, authentic. I mean, Kamala Harris is completely incapable of having moments like we just saw. She can't do it. And because she can't do it, she can't go on the Joe Rogan podcast for 3 hours. She can't have these moments that are connecting with people. And Trump, look, it's still a very close election. A lot of people hate his guts. He may very well lose. But it won't be because he's Hitler. It won't be because any of that stuff is true. He's a pretty entertaining guy. And that's why, he was one of the most famous people in America before he started running for president.
Stephen, we're getting to know Trump in a way many people have never seen him before. He's talking about his personal life more, like on Joe Rogan, his reaction to the White House, some of the behind the scenes things that we saw in, say, Tucker Carlson's documentary, Art of the Surge, even some of the behind the scenes video that they've released of him with his boys backstage of the one debate, calling them sweetheart and honey, like his grown boy's sweet. And then this, right? He's self-deprecating. He's making fun of his size. He's making fun of how hard it would be to get into a garbage truck like that, his vanity. I think this is actually very effective. And to Stu's point about the Dukakis thing, Ian Sams, the spokesperson for the Kamala Harris campaign, like just a complete hack, tweets out, who would have dreamt that he'd have not one but two Dukakis moments in one campaign, putting out the pictures of the McDonald's picture and him in the truck, like completely not getting it. And in that one tweet, you look at it and you think, I'm starting to get why they're doing so poorly. Like I don't know that Kamala Harris is all that well served by this team.
Ian Sams is the comms guy who famously put out the Jussie Smollett lynching tweet. And so that, just so you know the context of who that is. Yes, he is.
What?
Oh yeah, 100%. You generally know how effective Trump's stunts are based on the reaction of the people who don't like him. And this has been the case for years. And this took me back to 2016 when people didn't think he was going to win. It's like, how can we actually go for this? There was an interesting moment. You may not remember it, but Trump went to Pennsylvania and he stood in front of like a wall of garbage. And you had several journalists and people in the media like clowning on him about the advance team. And they're like, who thought this was a good idea for Trump to go to this garbage plant or a recycling plant or whatever it was, and stand in front of this wall of garbage. And then he also did a thing where he put on the hard hat, and they all kind of goofed and clowned on it, and it worked. And he won that state. And so I take things like this, they're funny and they are political stunts, but you take things like this, and to kind of echo what Stu said, Kamala Harris could be doing this stuff. The whole McDonald's thing was both hey, I kind of want to go and do this, but it's also a thing to question if Kamala Harris ever worked at McDonald's, which nobody is saying she hasn't. There's just no evidence that she has. She could have gone and done that. And this is, to me, kind of why this is effective, is like what he said. Trump can go on Joe Rogan and just, BS for 3 hours. Kamala won't do that for one reason or the other. Trump can go to McDonald's and work the fry. The fact that she let him get in front of that before her is mystifying to me. And so I looked at this thing from 2016 when, again, he's at this recycling plant in Pennsylvania. We'd never seen a Republican do that. We didn't see Mitt Romney, stand in front of like just a wall of recycled aluminum and talk to voters. And that's kind of the whole effectiveness of what Trump did in 2016. We can go through the antics and we can go through the brashness and all of that. But Trump started talking to voters that the Republican Party hadn't been talking to for decades. And that's why he is effective at doing these kinds of things. We can laugh at the gaudiness of the orange vest, but that hits different for people. He's somebody who he's largely allowed to rise to power in the Republican Party because he's speaking to people that the Republican Party has ignored.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I mean, honestly, one of my questions for Donald Trump at that first debate, I think it was at the first one back in 2015, was how long have you been a Republican? Because Trump wasn't. He was a Democrat, but Trump was just kind of more nonpartisan. He had his issues that he cared about and he understood. And he mentioned this on Rogan. Like you kind of got to run, you got to pick one. You can't run independent. It doesn't work out well. So he picked Republican. And instead of him falling on his face and the Republican Party squashing him, he bent the Republican Party to his will, and it's now his party. And that's why he's getting such a different coalition. They're putting him over the top. Now,
he just likes slapping the crap out of politicians. That's it. And no base feels more betrayed, right or wrongly, by their politicians than the Republican Party. And Trump just tapped into that. He just went up on stage and made fun of Marco Rubio and made fun of Rand Paul and made fun of Jeb Bush. And that's really all that the voting base wanted at that point.
Now, not everyone took so well to Trump's appearance last night in the garbage truck. I give you Nora O'Donnell, who seems to be on, like, I don't know if she got some sort of, maybe she was jealous of her co-host of that vice presidential debate, Margaret Brennan, for getting all of the criticism from anybody who was paying attention for that debate. Maybe she wanted to be in the news more for her bias, because she seems to be on a streak of getting as hardcore leftist as possible in her last waning months in the anchor chair. Here she is last night on the CBS Evening News.
He landed in Green Bay just a short time ago and then pulled this campaign stunt, speaking to reporters from a garbage truck. Proof that he and his supporters are giving no grace to a gaffe by President Biden, where he, in his explanation, inadvertently called Trump supporters garbage. This, of course, was in response to that racist joke about floating garbage told at a Trump rally just last weekend. Vice President Harris is distancing herself from the negativity and trying to drive home her unifying message that if elected, she will represent all Americans.
Oh, my God. It's different hearing it. I saw it written in my packets,
Stop going on CBS.
That is amazing. That's really incredible. God, she had everything in there about, like, that would show the bias. That's like his campaign stunt. He gave no grace to poor Biden, who clarified. Meanwhile, here's Kamala Harris with her unifying message. Oh, and a joke was told, a racist joke at a Trump rally without attributing it to some comic nobody's heard of. Like, who told the joke? Could have been Trump, right? Like, everything's in there, Stu.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's like, if you go back and you look at, like, the way they reacted after 2016 in the media, I think you get a real window into what's happening right now. In 2016, there was this idea that, and it's part of the hell of my life is to have to watch the mainstream media every single day and react to it. And when you saw the reaction after 2016, there was this idea that maybe people would kind of wake up and say, well, maybe we are in a little bit of a bubble here. Maybe we don't recognize what's going on in the rest of the country. There was this sort of, don't take Trump literally, take him seriously thing. And maybe we need to wake up a little bit and understand, like, what's the real motivation of regular people in the center of the country. And you thought that might be what they took from it, if they were being honest. But of course, they didn't go that direction. Instead, the lesson they really took out of that election was to say, we should have never covered the Hillary email scandal. Because the fact that we gave any opening at all to that, even though most of our coverage was to disprove it or say it wasn't a big deal, the fact that we alerted to anyone to that at all kind of puts the blame for this Trump thing a little bit on us. And next time, we're not going to let that happen. We saw as we got to 2020 with the Joe Biden laptop, they didn't let it happen, right? They shut it down. They didn't cover it. They banned people from tweeting it at the time. They did all the things they needed to do because they look at this as almost like a legacy, right? I can't be seen as someone who didn't do my part. My part was to make sure every single word I said pointed people to the right direction, led those stupid horses to that glorious water. And they tried it. They've been trying it. I think the American people have woken up, but you have to think if you go back a decent amount of time before the internet, all this stuff probably would have worked on the American people. Thankfully, there's at least a way for us to push back and get the truth. And I just don't think stuff like Trump is Hitler is going to be effective in this environment.
You nailed it with Bezos and the LA Times. I mean, for them to come out and say, We've just spotted something here recently. This may not be the best for our business. Right. Sure. Everybody knows that you don't want a president, especially one that you actually think might make an enemies list, which he's not going to do. He's not that way. He's already talking about, and I don't like this, letting Hunter Biden off the hook. He's not that guy. but he does have a long memory of, who helped him, who didn't help him. And I think all these places are like, well, let's not have this on our record that we also at the last minute went all in on a candidate that was going to lose. Because I think you're right. That's exactly how they feel. But the propaganda doesn't stop. I don't know if you saw the op-ed from the Washington Post, that says most Americans agree with Kamala Harris. They just don't know it. Take our poll. And you're like, what? And they put a list together. Have you seen this? They put a list together of 8 things that when you answer these honestly, it'll show you that you're right with Kamala Harris. Well, I took it. A couple of my friends took it. Stu just took it. No. No. We're still against Kamala's platform. They're so absolutely not self-aware. They have no idea that they actually live in a bubble. And if it is a bubble to them, they think everyone outside of that bubble is just stupid or racist or a Nazi.
Yeah, exactly. So on the subject of the Washington Post, the meltdown over there, which I honestly, I've been enjoying the whole thing. I've been liking it a lot. Jeff Bezos publishes a piece in WAPO. He owns it. Late last night, it hits today, called "The Hard Truth: Americans Don't Trust the News Media." Now, you and I could have written a piece that starts that way. We're so far, we're eyeball to eyeball, Jeff. Yes, we totally agree.
We could have done it 20 years ago, by the way.
Yes, we must be believed to be accurate. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we are failing on the second requirement. So far, we are all in agreement. You are failing. You are not believed to be accurate. Reality is an undefeated.
But they're failing on the second one because they're failing on the first one.
Yes, of course.
It's not like we just don't believe
stand by.
them.
Let me tee it up. Reality is an undefeated champion. It would be easy to blame others for our long and continuing fall in credibility and therefore decline in impact, but a victim mentality will not help. Right on, sir. Complaining is not a strategy. We must work harder to control what we can control to increase our credibility. All right. So first of all, he's trying to say we've lost credibility without going through the list of how they've misreported, intentionally misled, and what the plan is. Because what he's doing here is trying to justify his decision not to endorse any candidate. And without taking ownership, Glenn, of the many errors, lies, repeated false stories that they have pushed over the past 8-9 years. This is a Jeff Bezos ass covering. This is not a mea culpa designed to actually bring back in anybody right of center.
No, this is like the 3-step program from AA. I mean, you have to admit that what you have been doing isn't working. You have to lay out all of the things that you have done and make sure that you make amends for those things. You can't just say, yep, I'm an alcoholic, and you know what? My real problem is people now know I'm an alcoholic, and that's the real problem. No, that's not the real problem. The real problem is you've done this, and this, and that's what led to your alcoholism.
Yeah, no, it's like the alcoholic being like, nobody wants to be around me. My breath smells bad. I keep falling asleep in the middle of work, and it seems to be turning people off. So I'm going to stop doing those things. But no mention of the drinking. We're not going to work on that at all.
No, the cause. You've got to go to the root cause. And I don't know, is it because he's afraid of his own people? Because for them to quit over this, do you really think anybody who reads the Washington Post is not aware of the Washington Post's desire to have Kamala Harris? I mean, look at the op-ed that I just showed you. They're still doing that. I mean, everybody knows.
Yes. Okay. So he goes on to say as follows. Presidential endorsements do nothing to tip the scales in an election. Agreed. No undecided voters in Pennsylvania are going to say, I'm going with newspaper A's endorsement. None. Agreed. What they actually do is create a perception of bias. I mean, yes, but it's already there. A perception of non-independence. I hate to break it to you, Jeff. That was riddled all over your magazine or your newspaper long before endorsements. Ending them is a principled decision, and it's the right one. Well, I'm glad you agree with yourself. Then he goes on to say this, Glenn. Buckle up. Ready?
You're so funny. I just love you.
Many people are turning to off-the-cuff podcasts, inaccurate social media posts, and other unverified news sources, which can quickly spread misinformation and deepen divisions. The Washington Post and the New York Times win prizes, but increasingly we talk only to a certain elite. While I do not and will not push my personal interest, I will also not allow this paper to stay on autopilot and fade into irrelevance, overtaken by unresearched podcasts and social media barbs. Not without a fight. It's too important. That's it.
Oh my gosh, you self-important gob of vomit. Look, they don't understand that I believe that the way Trump is seeing this right now is he's actually open and authentic, and he is talking to the regular people through these podcasts. Nobody relates to ABC, NBC, CBS anymore and their anchors. Who listens to those people anymore? And yet they're the ones doing the debates. They're the ones that are doing the important interviews that end up being edited one way or another. These podcasts that Donald Trump is coming on, like Joe Rogan, I think will be the replacement for the media in 4 years. I think if Trump wins, it will largely be because he understood where trust is.
The nonsense that Jeff Bezos spews in this piece is truly stomach-turning. Unresearched podcasts or social media barbs. You can tell this is a man who knows he's lost irrelevance, clinging to the last vestiges of it. The golden days when WAPO used to be a thing, Woodward and Bernstein, when they can control the narrative and bring down a president, those days are gone, and he knows it. The Rogan interview of Trump right now has 37 million views. 37 million views. And that's not, with all due respect to X, where I post my own stuff too, but X will count a view if you just scroll by it. On YouTube, you've actually got to see it to get a view. You've got to click on it. And that's 37 million. The Washington Post, as of 2023, had 136,000 print subscriptions, 136,000. That's not a lot. And digital subscriptions, they had 2.5 million. Okay, I have more than that to my YouTube channel. I'm sure Glenn does too. They're irrelevant. No one's listening to them anymore. And Jeff Bezos knows it. And so this, I'm not going to endorse because I'm going to resurrect my paper, makes no sense. They've already sold their credibility up the river. They know it. And this is him desperately trying to hold on to any sort of pat on the head ability he can get from Donald Trump.
You can only lose so much credibility, and they've made themselves irrelevant. Nobody needs the Ivy League expert to ask questions that no American is asking. January 6th is one of them. If they bring up January 6th one more time over the possibility of, I don't know, sending my son or daughter to nuclear war over in Ukraine or Taiwan or wherever else they will want to gin up a war, I don't know. I think that's more important than January 6th. When you want to bring up January 6th, if you didn't have a record of bringing up the burning down of, say, just Minneapolis or Portland, you don't have any credibility at all, so why would I be listening to you on that? Joe Rogan was asking the questions that the average person wanted to know. And these guys are just like I think you are. I hope I am. But we're more like the average person. Now, you're very well educated. I'm pretty much a dope. But Joe Rogan, the people they relate to him. And that's why the ABC, NBC, CBS doesn't work. They don't relate at all. You know, it's like I'm a big TV history buff, and Sid Caesar did Your Show of Shows back in the 1950s. It had Woody Allen as a writer. It had Carl Reiner as a writer, Mel Brooks as a writer.
Wow.
It lost every week, lost to the Lawrence Welk Show. And here's why. They were making jokes about Shakespeare and things that were on Broadway. The rest of the country could not relate at all. So missed some really good comedy because it wasn't aimed. It was aimed just for their little clique. That doesn't work. And that's what the media has become. Let's just talk about our friends at our cocktail parties on Madison Avenue or on Central Park West are talking about. That's not America. You've got to relate to Americans and let the candidates talk. I really, truly believe this is the last election. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I really think by 2028, if he wins, by 2028, you're not going to see the mainstream media have the debates. They're going to be farmed out to whoever has the biggest audience and is the most relatable. You might have journalists doing it, but they're not going to be from ABC, NBC, The Washington Post only. They will also include other people because this system doesn't work anymore. They're fighting to bring back the 3-network system.
It's over.
It doesn't work.
It's too late.
It's
I
over.
mean, the 3 networks are as dead as the fake skeletons I have in my front yard right now. They are that dead. You can put a wig on them like I did. You can put a dress or a suit on them like I did. But they're dead and they're not coming back. Listen to this, Glenn. Canadian Debbie just sent me a couple of examples of the Washington Post. Now, see, even without their presidential endorsement, if you can guess which side the Washington Post is on in this presidential election, okay? Got a few for you.
Yeah, okay.
Here's one. Trump and allies plot revenge. Justice Department control in a second term. Here's another one. Trump's promise to exact revenge won't be hindered by mere laws.
Wow.
Here's another. Trump wants revenge in 2024. And here's yet another one. Trump doesn't just want to win. He wants revenge. That's just a couple over the last few days.
And that is crazy.
We could keep going.
He's not. He is. I don't know if you've seen him. He is the opposite. No, let me say it this way. He's exactly what I think Republicans and independents didn't think he would be in this election. Back in 2020, 21, when people were talking about Donald Trump running again, we're like, oh no, it's all going to be about 2020 and I lost and what they've done to me, et cetera, et cetera. He's not. In fact, I think he's running the best. Yeah, he's running the best campaign I have seen any Republican run.
So explain the CNN poll, okay? Because the CNN poll, everything seemed to be kind of going one way, where it was tightening and it was getting a little bit closer. And Trump was tying it up in each state, if not taking a lead. But that was good for him because he'd been down 3 or down 1. So to be down 3 and then up 1 or down 3 and then tied was good. And then comes this CNN poll. And I realize life does not revolve around CNN, but the CNN poll did drop and it's got a big lead in there for Harris in Michigan and in Wisconsin, like +5 in each state. Do you believe it?
Well, Megyn, a poll is a range of scores. And so when we put out a poll result of, let's say, Trump up by 1 point, that range could be Trump winning by 4 or Trump losing by 2. So when you see a poll that has, let's say, Harris up by 5 points in Wisconsin, that poll still indicates that, yes, Harris could win by 5, she could win by 11, but she could also lose by a point. So to me, that type of number is really on the outside, the fringe end of what you'd expect. In 2020 in Wisconsin, the polling generally had Biden up around 6 points, and he won that state by less than 1 point. Michigan had a similar type of polling error and this is not just CNN, but generally across the polls, underreporting the Trump vote. So yeah, when you take a look at some of these polls, they seem a little as an outlier in the fact that like Michigan or Wisconsin's been a 1-point race back in 2016. It was a 1-point race in 2020. Do we really think it's going to bounce 5 or 6 points in a direction when it's been so locked in? And then if you jump over to Michigan, do you think Michigan is closer or further away for the Democrats than they were in 2020 when Biden wins by just over 2 points? This would suggest that Harris is doing better than Biden when a lot of the other polling, particularly the national polling, is also showing the race tightening closer to 2016 numbers than compared to 2020.
Okay, so having dealt with CNN, which you seem to be suggesting may be a bit of an outlier, take it with a grain of salt. And they haven't been doing a ton of polling. Like I think their last poll was a couple of months ago. So I don't know if they have their finger on the pulse or what's happening there. But having dealt with that, zoom out and tell us where you think this race stands.
Well, yeah, if we take a look at like the big picture, remember where we were in July and August, where Trump takes this big lead when Biden is faltering, and then Harris jumps into the race. And then she appeared to take a big lead of 4 or 5 points nationally. But what we've seen really since that first debate, even a little bit before that debate, is a slow melt of that support for Harris. And what it looks like coming into the election is there's some momentum for Trump as we enter election day in some of these states. And remember, he doesn't need to win all of the swing states just to get to the 270 mark. And when you do look at that polling as a whole, for example, Pennsylvania, we don't see many polls having Harris leading in Pennsylvania. You see polls that are tied or they're slightly leading towards Trump. Pennsylvania is a key state for the Democrats. If they lose Pennsylvania, really difficult road to 270 for Harris. So that's a number that, as you take a look at, it looks like Pennsylvania should go towards Trump, and that would suggest he would have some success on election night. But if Pennsylvania does flip and stays with Harris, that opens up some other pathways that we've been seeing. But the general take is that Harris is doing slightly worse than Biden in 2020. And the question is it worse enough for Trump to be able to overtake her in states like Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, all within a point? Those are all states that ended up within a percentage point. The other states that are a little bit further away would be Pennsylvania and Michigan, but those are also very competitive. Most of them have it tied or within a point on either side.
Okay, let's talk about possible paths, because as I was looking at the numbers today, and you can just Google those interactive maps and start clicking on what if she wins these states, what if he wins those states. Because I was looking, I compared the possible paths to the latest battleground averages, taking the Real Clear Politics and 538 averages of all polls. And for example, I looked at Georgia. RCP average has Trump up 2.4. 538 has Trump up 1.8 in the average of all polls. The latest Emerson poll, which was earlier in October, showed Trump up 1. So it looks tight, but it looks somewhat comfortable given the comparison states for Trump. Agree or disagree?
I would agree. Even with our poll at 1 point, the previous poll was at 3 points. And so we were seeing some movement in Georgia, but I think Georgia is a pretty strong state for Trump. He seems to be getting along with Governor Kemp fairly well at this time. And those numbers are around, I think, what you mentioned on the aggregate, around 2 to 3 points, which, remember, Trump does better in 2016 when he wins the state, and then Biden barely takes it in 2020. Maybe it falls in between those two numbers, but it seems to be leaning towards Trump at this time.
Just the makeup with Kemp should be worth 11,000 votes, you would think. We did see his numbers shift almost immediately after those two patched things up. Okay, North Carolina. There was a report earlier this week. I don't know how much stock to put in it, frankly, because it hasn't been everywhere, and the polls still show North Carolina tight. But there was a report by the Carolina Journal that she had pulled some $2 million worth of her advertising from North Carolina. And she had made like a $2.3 or $4 million ad buy, and she pulled almost all of it out. And it's not because she's running away with North Carolina. It's not like she's up 10. This is looking more like Minnesota, so why spend the money there? But it being as tight as it appears to be in the polls, you also wonder why she would throw in the towel there, given that her campaign is rich. They have a lot of money. So I don't know what's happening in North Carolina. It's strange to me that she'd pull the ads given what I see in the polls, but maybe you can help me. RCP average has Trump up 1, 538 has Trump up 1.1. The Emerson poll, your group in late October, showed Trump up 2.
Yes. And so North Carolina is one of those states that Harris is trying to win back from the Republicans. So it's always trying to win, a game on the other team's home field. And North Carolina would be a Republican home field, like Georgia is a Democratic home field, where they're trying to hold those electoral votes that Biden won, and the Republicans are trying to take that back. But North Carolina's, I always thought, was a bit of a stretch for the Harris team. This is a state that Trump won in 2016 and in 2020. It's been a state that has been pretty solid. Remember, it goes for Obama in 2008 and then switches back to Romney in 2012. So North Carolina historically would be a hard state for Harris to try to break through on. I know that the Democrats were a little bullish with Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans, showing a weak campaign against Stein, thinking that there might be some reverse coattails. But we're not necessarily seeing that in our numbers. It looks pretty, even though 2 points isn't a huge, it's still within the polls margin of error, but it's a big number to overcome for the Democrats. And I think that's maybe why she pulled some of that ad buy out of North Carolina, because if Stein is still only at 12, 13-point lead in that gubernatorial race, that might not be enough to pull her over the top. And in fact, we see much more ticket splitting when we see folks going on the Trump side, willing to balance their ticket that way. So I don't know if it's going to help Harris in that regard in North Carolina.
I mean, I can see a real MAGA voter in North Carolina being like, the lieutenant governor is a hot mess. I don't believe his denials on all of his weird scandal, but I love Trump. I'm not going to make Trump pay for this guy's scandal. So I guess, we'll
Megyn,
see.
To your point,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, he's been down. Robinson's been down by double digits for months, and it hasn't impacted the top of the race. As you mentioned, those polls have it, tied or 1 point. It's probably leaning to Trump by about 1 to 2 points, but that's going to be a lot to overcome considering the situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go. We did Georgia, we did North Carolina. Let's talk about Arizona. RCP has Trump up 2.5, 538. Again, this is the average of all polls, and they curate the polls. They don't take any poll in these averages. They only include the top-notch pollsters with a proven record, like Emerson and others. Okay, so 538 has 2.2, so up 2.5, up 2.2 in the averages. Emerson had Trump up 2 in early October. What do you think is happening in Arizona?
Arizona, as a border state, is a little different than these other states we've talked about because immigration is their top issue. So when we talk about these swing states, it's generally the economy is the top issue at around 40%. But in immigration, it drops down to about 30%, and immigration is at 30%. And then what's also interesting in Arizona, which is different than these other swing states, where females are voting for Harris and males are voting for Trump, in Arizona, both males and females are breaking for Trump. Not by the same propensity like we're seeing of males in other states, but both genders are breaking, which is unusual considering there has been a gender divide in this race. But in Arizona, it's unique. I think the immigration issue, it separates it from the other swing states. And that's been a state that Trump has been leading for a while. The Senate race there is different, where Gallego seems to have a small but steady lead over Lake, pretty consistent. So there, again, the ticket splitting is what we're seeing, where they'll go with Trump. Even though they went with Biden last time, this is a state where Trump could try to win back those 11 electoral votes.
Wow. I mean, Arizona's gone more and more blue lately. They've got this Democrat governor. They've got Democrat senators. So is Arizona still a red state, would you say? I mean, I realize it's one of the swing states, but is it in its nature, do you think it's more red than blue?
Well, I think the issues are more red, but I think the voters are more purple, and they're willing to vote across aisle lines. They're not, locked in with one of the parties we may have seen in the past. I don't think it's Barry Goldwater country exactly what, was back in the day, But yeah, there's an inkling based on the issues, particularly on the immigration side, to try to get that resolved and solved. And so those line up better with Republican candidates. But as you mentioned, the Democrats do have, they were able to take both Senate races and the governor's race. So Arizona's definitely been open to the Democratic approach, but they've also rejected too far of a progressive Democrat. And that's what makes the Gallego race really interesting, that he's been able to hold on to that lead, even though he's a little bit more progressive than where Arizona tends to be.
Yeah, you got Mark Kelly. But I mean, Gallego, he's definitely a progressive guy, but they just don't seem to be responding well to Carrie Lake for, a host of reasons. She was on the podcast saying, I disagree. My internal polls say that these polls are wrong. We'll find out very soon whether any of that is true. Okay, so far, based on this discussion, it would appear Trump is actually looking good in Georgia, in North Carolina, and in Arizona. And Nevada, remarkably, Spencer, seems so far to be leaning Republican. Doesn't mean things won't change over the next 5 days as the voting continues, but like something incredible is happening in Nevada.
Well, Nevada, used to be more of a swing state. It's become more Democrat over the last, 6 to 8 years. Obama helped make it more Democrat, but they've been pretty strong at like 2.5 points for Clinton, 2.5 points for Biden. Now the race is much tighter. It's about 0.5 point. I still think it leans towards Harris, but Trump has made up a lot of ground. Again, the Senate race seems Jackie Rosen's got a stronger lead over the Republican Brown by a couple of points. So you're not seeing any coattails from Trump moving down, perhaps. But that's a state where I think the Democrats can still hold it. It's 6 electoral votes, which are important, but it could also swing. It's really rolling the dice there in the Silver State. Those polls have been really tight. Now, what's interesting there is that you've got this huge Hispanic population, and Hispanic polling is really difficult to do. Some in the Hispanic community, they're much more not as confident of taking the polls. They're not willing to answer the phones or give out that information. And so sometimes that polling can get a little wonky out there. But what we've seen is a pretty consistent close race between these two candidates for a couple of months.
But what I'm basing my comments on are the John Ralston reports on how the early voting seems to be going. And it seems, we discussed this with Charlie Kirk yesterday, like the Republican votes coming in are exceeding anything they've seen in the past. And from counties that they didn't expect, like the Democrats so far, the response in Clark County, which is that's how they win the elections out there, right? Clark County, it's the Vegas district. That's how the Democrats win. The Democrat response has been lower and the Republican response has been higher than they anticipated. So right now, if you're Trump, you have to be feeling better than you've ever felt before about your chances in Nevada.
You do. In those early voting numbers that you've referenced, it's important to see the Republicans, I believe, are +5. They're about 39% of the vote versus 34% for the Democrats in this early vote, which is counter to where the Republicans were 4 years ago. Now, are they cannibalizing their election day vote, or is there even more Republican vote that's going to come out? If that's the case, then Trump will take the state because he's leading right now in the early voting. I presume the Democrats will get a push through their culinary unions or other groups out there to try to match that vote. But those are important numbers to follow over the next few days, because if the Democrats don't match that 39%, the conventional wisdom is the Republicans will have a better day of get out the vote effort and should be able to maintain whatever advantage if they have one on election day.
Well, it'll also really be interesting to see whether the culinary unions and so on do what the Teamsters did, where the pressure from the top is to get out and vote and to vote blue, but the rank and file don't listen. They don't want who the people who are running the union want, and they go into the voting booth and they do what they think is right. So, it's just with Trump, it's not as clear cut as it used to be when it comes to the union vote. So I don't know. I'm not sure the Harry Reid union machine is going to be as helpful to the Dems as it has been.
I think that's a great point, Megan. And it's not just in Nevada, it's Michigan, it's Pennsylvania. What we're seeing is this whole change of the electorate happening right in front of our face. And sometimes you don't recognize it when, the wind's blowing in all these directions, but I can see the union votes shifting a little bit from left to right, and then more of that elite, higher educated vote shifting a little bit more from the right to the left. And we'll see how it all balances off on November 5th. But it seems as if the electorate is being shaken up this election cycle.
Okay, so of the 4 states I just listed, which would give Trump the presidency, North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, which is the one most likely to go blue and not red?
Nevada.
Yeah. Okay, so that would be 6 electoral votes over to the blue side, and that would mean Trump would need to win one of the blue walls. He would have to win Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, which are tougher, I think. That's a tougher road. I mean, again, Nevada, as you point out, is more of a blue state, but given the weirdnesses we just discussed, might not be ungettable for him. So which of the 3 blue walls is he looking the best in? Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania?
So in our polling, we've seen him strongest in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin was a state that he lost by half a point. Remember, Michigan and Pennsylvania, he loses by a larger amount, about two points in Michigan, about a point in Pennsylvania. Remember, Nevada is a state where, in 2020, Nevada is a state where Biden wins by just over 2 points. So out of those states, Wisconsin was the closest of them. And what we've seen pretty consistent in all of our polling is a 0 to 1 point Trump advantage. And it's not a huge advantage. But we have consistently seen in Wisconsin polling underrepresent Trump. So in all of the polls, not just the Emerson poll, every poll out there generally has underrepresented Trump in 2016 and again in 2020. And when I say it's like 5 points, 6 points. So to me, anything in Wisconsin that's tied, the conventional wisdom is that Trump will take it because we're underrepresenting. It's not intentional. I would want to capture everybody's opinion, but it's just historically, you got to look back at your track record and say, what states are harder to poll than others? And that happens to be, it seems, one of those states.
Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show and our weekend special episode where we look back at some of our best content for the past week. We had some great shows this week, including my pal Piers Morgan on to talk about everything from the trial of Donald Trump to Meghan Markle and her new lectures on friendship. Very few know this woman like Piers does. And speaking of guests totally in their comfort zone, Heather McDonald was on this week, and we got into the leftist indoctrination at the center of the campus chaos we are seeing, with anti-Israel college students getting arrested in New York and beyond. We talked about the harassment of Jewish students with the EJs, Emily Jashinsky and Eliana Johnson. And our pals Mike Davis and Dave Ehrenberg were here talking about the latest on Trump, specifically in this New York State Supreme case that he's facing. But we also got into the ridiculous hypocrisy of NBC News when it comes to, quote, checkbook journalism and the use of NDAs, which suddenly those over at NBC find horrifying. Who would use an NDA to silence a woman? Spare me. Not to mention Alec Baldwin's crackhead Barney confrontation. Enjoy, and I'll talk to you on Monday. I've got to ask you about Trump. He's facing 4 criminal trials. Yeah. He's got a case being argued before the U.S. Supreme Court right now. He's got the head of the National Enquirer, former David Pecker, on the witness stand right now talking about this deal they struck to cover up for Trump and try to bury bad stories and promote good stories and hit his adversaries with negative stories. First, let me just ask you, because you've spent your life in news. I mean, you've been writing, for newspapers long before most people even knew you on cam. So what do you make of this deal? And would it ever have struck you that this was illegal? This kind of thing is illegal, to accept money from somebody or give money to somebody in order to quash their story or kill it, as the saying goes?
No, look, I ran 2 of the biggest tabloid newspapers in Britain for 10 years. And this kind of deal in different ways goes on everywhere, with all newspapers around the world. You know, if you have a massive star and there's a damaging story about them and they want to suppress that story, then sometimes they'll give you a better one about themselves to kill off the other one. Or, there's always some kind of deal that could be done. When I just realised this would be the first case, Megyn, that was going to come up with the four, because some of them are clearly, I think, more serious and more legitimate and better cases to answer for Trump than others. But this one seems so petty. It seems so trivial. Ultimately, it's about whether or not Donald Trump had a one-night stand with a porn star 18 years ago in a Beverly Hills hotel. I don't care. I've interviewed Stormy Daniels. She's very plausible when you interview her. But I wasn't in the room. I don't know what really happened. Donald Trump denies it. But yeah, exactly. But either way, I don't care. And I don't think most people care very much. And I think that what's happened here, you've got a clearly politically motivated prosecutor who's a paid-up Democrat. You've got a judge who's obviously a Democrat as well. And they've decided to throw the kitchen sink at Trump by jacking up what should be just a state misdemeanor at worst into some sort of huge seismic federal crime. Well, all the polling I've seen on this shows that most Americans aren't buying this. They don't think that Trump committed a crime here, and they think it's a massive overreach by the prosecution. So I think I heard you at the start, and I totally agree with you. Whatever happens here, Trump may get acquitted, because there might be one member of that jury that just goes, you know what, this is ridiculous. And demeaning, frankly, for America to drag a former president of the United States, one of the 45 people who've held this incredibly high office, to drag them through such an unedifying and petty courtroom fiasco for weeks on end, when he should be legitimately allowed to campaign as the nominee for the Republican Party for the next elections. I think for all sorts of reasons, this seems to me a ridiculous start to this legal battle against Trump. But whether he wins or loses, you see, I think he either wins because one juror has common sense, or he loses but actually gets martyred in the process. So spectacular. I watched the scenes this morning going into court with people chanting Trump, 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 and 4 more years, 4 more years. I don't think this is hurting him. I think it actually over time will help him. I think it's martyring Trump. And I think that most right-minded Americans who are not partisan on the left, but are sort of independent or moderates, will look at this and go, is this really fair? And I always say, I remember when Bill Clinton was president. And I remember him paying Paula Jones $850,000, whatever it was, to pay her off to settle a harassment case. And I remember him having sex with an intern, Monica Lewinsky, in the Oval Office. Both of those things are a lot worse, in my estimation, given he was a serving president when the Monica Lewinsky thing happened, and given he did the payment when he was a serving president to Paula Jones, than anything Trump did in the run-up to an election to basically get rid of a bit of a messy story that probably his biggest concern was not the damage it might do to the election, because I think people factored in Trump and womanizing. It was probably he didn't want Melania to know all about this.
But you know what, Piers, we've been covering this on the show. This is not well enough understood, including even by us. I have legal panels on all the time. We're all lawyers and we talk about this. The relevant standard is not what was in Trump's head or what his subjective reasons for the payment were. It's the objectively looking at the money. Could said money, in this case, a hush money payment, have ever been used for anything other than to advance a campaign? Is this kind of payment, you look at the nature of the payment. So if it is payment for, I don't know, a podium at a debate, a lectern at a debate stage. Okay, yes, that is something you might only ever buy for a debate, right? Like for a presidential run. But a hush money, everybody pays that. As somebody who's in the tabloids for years, tons of people pay hush money payments. So that's the standard. It's not even what was in Trump's head or whether they get an admission that this was to help his electoral chances. It's irrelevant. Okay, I've got to ask you about this. Speaking of martyrs and people who have been really unfairly put upon, let me ask you about Meghan Markle.
One of the great martyrs of our time.
Poor thing. Her castle was so small. She is apparently getting back into the podcast lane thanks to this far left pro-women Lemonada company. Richard Eden over in the Daily Mail, your old hot, has a piece today saying they're struggling to get this thing out of the starting blocks. No podcasts are even expected anytime this year and not until 2025. And the podcast, by the way, is going to celebrate the joys of cooking, or at least something she's doing. Her Netflix show, I guess, is going to celebrate the joys of cooking, gardening, entertaining, and friendship, Piers. She's going to be teaching us how to be a good friend. I can't wait to find out from Meghan Markle what that's like.
Well, as one of the many friends that she cut off spectacularly the moment she got a bit of royal action, along with her entire family, of course, on both sides, apart from her mother. I don't think Meghan Markle's in any position to be lecturing anybody about friendship. It always made me laugh that the Archewell website, their charitable foundation, says it's dedicated to compassion. I mean, it's hard to imagine two people who've been less compassionate in the last few years to the ones around their loved ones than these two, right? This is two people who trashed all their family, whether it was her father or whether it was Harry's entire family at a time when Prince Philip and the Queen were both dying. There they were on national television, from Oprah Winfrey to Netflix to whoever, as the Spotify guy put it, whatever grift they could get paid for, up they were trashing their families. So the idea now that they're reduced, or that certainly Meghan Markle is now reduced from somebody who, remember Meghan, she had a fairy tale royal wedding that was seen around the world. The carriages drawn down to Windsor Castle and so on. It was an amazing event. Everyone in this country, I'm in the UK at the moment, everyone loved that marriage when it happened. There was universal support for it, euphoria. It was only their behavior in the first year of their marriage when they began to behave rankly hypocritically, lecturing about poverty whilst having $500,000 baby showers, to lecturing us about the need to watch our carbon footprint and using Elton John and George Clooney's private jets like taxi cabs. And it was the constant hypocrisy that they got picked up on by the media, and then they couldn't handle the criticism from the media, and then it all turned hostile. Then they started suing everybody, and the whole thing got so toxic. Eventually, they just say, we've had enough of this. We're not going to do any more dreary duties on a wet Wednesday, which is what you have to do to earn your royal titles in the estimation of the public. And they decamped off to Montecito, bought themselves a massive mansion. And they were supposed to be doing it, Megyn, if you remember, this was going to be their liberation, their freedom, and it was supposed to make them happy. I've never seen two more miserable people who never stop whining and suing absolutely everybody in the pretense that this is because they found their liberation and freedom. If you're so damn happy and free and liberated, well, shut up, stop whining and complaining about everything. But they're obviously not happy. And it's obviously been diminishing returns where when you trash your family again and again and again, eventually there's not much left to say. And people don't really want to hear it. It's like the Spotify guy said, they're just a pair of grifters who just want to trash their family for loads of money and not put a shift in to do proper work. You and I know how hard it is to do this kind of thing properly. It's a lot of work with a dedicated team, and you put the hours in, and you've got to be creative and high energy and really put graft in. These two wanted to do massive deals with companies and then not do any work. Nobody wants to see her next podcast. Nobody listened to the first one. And that's for this thing she's now doing with the ridiculously long name that no one can remember, where she's going to try and be the
American, whatever. I have to write it down. American Riviera Orchard. See footnote 47 for the remainder of the name.
Right, and she's now got all her celebrity, sort of B-list, C-list mates putting out Instagram posts about her jam, and it's like, the mighty fall. This was a woman who had it all in this country, who literally had it all, and is now flogging jam from her kitchen in Montecito, while her husband runs around fuming about absolutely everything and everyone, because he knows in his gut, he knows what he's lost. And eventually, those chickens will come home to roost.
And then she will be touting their eggs on her stupid website where she's wearing evening gowns while walking around her mansion that we're supposed to feel sorry for her because she's in. I love it. But on the grifter subject, one of the funniest things that was Bill Simmons, who said that at Spotify, I've never seen such a pair of grifters. They wouldn't do any work. She got paid all this money. She barely did anything. Him too. Yeah. And now she signs this pod deal with this Lemonada. We're not getting a podcast for years. And then she decides to sign this deal with Netflix. She's done nothing other than now this show she's going to do on cooking and friendship. Finally, okay, we'll believe it when we see it. And then finally, she's got her little Riviera thing going, where so far we've had one jar of strawberry jam. She's so lazy.
The whole thing. Well, it's sort of lazy and a bit pathetic. This is somebody who demands that we use the title Duchess of Sussex. I come from Sussex, which is a county in the south of England. I've spent more time in Sussex in the last month than Meghan Markle has spent in her entire life. She has actual
She's
right.
your ruler, Piers. I didn't know that. She's your...
She ain't my ruler, Megyn Kelly. She is somebody who, listen, as I've said to you, I think many times before, if they actually want to do this kind of thing and trade themselves around as sort of, celebrities and do that sort of circus, then they can do it, but they can't do it with the royal titles. They shouldn't be using the royal titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex, bestowed on them by the monarchy, an institution they constantly complain about and trash whenever they get the chance. Fine, you want to go off and be celebrities in California, do it. But don't trade on the titles. Every time I see her demanding to be called Duchess of Sussex, I laugh. Nobody in Britain calls her that. It's Meghan Markle. She got lucky, met her prince, dragged him out of the bosom of his family, dragged him away from the monarchy, which bestowed those titles on them, and has now ruthlessly, with him, exploited those titles for massive personal gain. And I think it's disgusting and hypocritical. They shouldn't be allowed to do it. I hope that King Charles, who obviously is massively distracted by his illness, but I hope that King Charles at some stage just has that conversation and says, you can't keep the titles, I'm sorry, but you can't keep demeaning the status of being a member of the royal family and attacking the family and the monarchy and retain your titles. You can just be Harry and Meghan. And see how you get on, by the way, when you're no longer royals, because the answer is not very far.
In the video we're going to show you here, Yale students formed a human chain to block a Jewish student from entering the university. Like, I can't believe this is happening in America. Watch this.
You're literally touching us. Get in my way. I'm allowed to walk. That's fine. I'm not going to do nothing. He has no freedom to movement. I'm just trying to walk around. Let me walk around. But you can walk through us. We're here. Don't get in my way. He's allowed
All right, so it looks to me like a conservative Jewish person. He's obviously openly Jewish, and they're not letting him pass. The mob follows him. He moves left, they move left. He moves right, they move right, as a swarm, and they're not letting him. This is America. This cannot happen at Yale University. Didn't you go there, Eliana?
I'm a 2006 graduate, and the Beacon also had a reporter up there covering the events as they transpired on Friday and Saturday, where just much like at Columbia, the students were camped out in tents on a university plaza. And it is noteworthy that these events took place at a World War II memorial to Yale students who served in the wars and tore down an American flag and cheered as it was brought to the ground at that memorial.
We actually have that. Here's a bit of it. SOT 7.
Viva, viva Palestina!
Tearing down the American flag. That's what they're cheering at, folks. I'm sorry, but that weird, it's like a part of the call to prayer. That sound, I've heard it in too many terror videos. It still brings a chill when I hear it. It's alarming. And to hear it yelled when an American flag falls on one of our most prestigious, or at least used to be, university campuses, Eliana, brings up something very vile. I mean, I recoil. I can't believe this is not free speech. This is not about free speech. These people are calling for the death of Jews. They're tearing down American flags on American university colleges. And we're just sitting back saying, you Jews, go ahead, Eliana. Sure, you'd feel perfectly comfortable going to class and crossing their little picket line as the mob swarms in front of you, tearing down a flag, our flag, to say, no, try it. We dare you.
Yeah, at a memorial for young men who went and fought and died fighting the Nazis. It's insane, and it's noteworthy that administrators issued warnings on Saturday, but did nothing. And at late Saturday evening, a young Jewish student, a young woman, was sent to the hospital when one of these protesters poked her in the eye with a Palestinian flag. And this morning, the police were called in to start arresting people. It must be Yale University's president, Peter Salovey, announced a year ago that this would be his last year. They are looking for a new president. And so I think that has motivated him to take a more hands-off approach. This is not his problem. It's the next person's problem. However, he must be watching what is taking place on the Columbia University campus and thought, I've got to start clearing this out. But if these guys don't know already that their response to this is not to issue warnings and stand by as people start to get hurt, as private property, private university property is desecrated, rules are broken, university entrances and exits are blocked from students, warnings are not enough. Time to start calling in the cops. I listened to a recording that we were not authorized to share that a student took of her call to the Yale University Police Department, where the police officers told her, we are concerned. We have not been authorized by the university to do anything yet. That obviously changed overnight, but 48 hours this went on. Students were hurt. Property was desecrated. People were not allowed to pass freely through campus. Enough is enough. You don't have a right to attend Yale University. Time for students to be expelled.
Yeah. Honestly, I would expel them and I would do whatever I had to do to get them off campus. Whether it's cops, National Guard, we have to get dramatic. This cannot be allowed. This is not about free speech. You know where you can go have perfect free speech rights? Out in the town square. Emily, you mentioned it earlier. Free speech is important. Yes, no one's saying they're not allowed to scream this hateful shit. That is the glory of being an American. You can scream hateful shit unless it amounts to incitement. But you have limited free speech rights when it comes to the center of the campus square. And this has gone beyond that menacing that they're doing to the Jewish student that we just showed there. That's illegal. You can't do that. That is not okay wherever you are. And it's certainly not okay on a college campus. I don't like when, and no, you weren't doing this, but when people try to reduce this kind of behavior to free speech, it's bullshit. That's not what this is. So we need to be really clear on acceptable behaviors. And all you need to do is picture a bunch of whites doing this to a black student about 40 years ago and ask yourself whether you defend it.
A reporter got kind of trolled on Twitter over the weekend. I want to say she was from the New York Times or the Washington Post for saying she was there and what she saw at Columbia was, a lot of that crazy
Karen
stuff was
Attiah.
happening.
She's the one who blocked me. I used to follow her and then she cheered, this is what resistance looks like after a bunch of Israel babies and women and children were murdered. And I was like, okay, it's over between the two of us. But she's out there. So she's a Washington Post columnist who is out there. Hold on, I pulled it. Oh, here it is. Okay, just to add to what you're saying, and then I'll give you back the floor. I teach my last class of the semester at Columbia this coming week. God help them. That explains a lot. And the university has made this situation into a war zone. Well, so far we agree, but we disagree on how. It's by them permitting these protests in the first place. No, she says, most of the people posting about Columbia have not stepped foot on campus and have no idea what's going on. As I said, the demonstrations I saw last week were comprised of students of all faiths and backgrounds. Columbia escalated the situation by calling in armed police. The ones I saw, Hitler's always been very nice to me, Emily. All I saw was a perfect gentleman who was a very talented public speaker. That's what she's doing here. I didn't see any problems. Oh, then none must have existed, Karen.
Well, it's insane to put the burden just on the university for the actions of the students. I mean, I agree. I think we all agree the university is doing too little. So yes, she's right on that point. I guess she wants the university to do too much, but some of this is the university's fault. But you're seeing so little of people holding people who are organizing these protests, people who are, peacefully participating in legitimate civil disobedience. They are not being asked to take control of the situation, because to the extent that Karen Attiah is allowed to teach whatever nonsense she's teaching in that class, clearly Columbia University is letting people make these arguments, these ridiculous arguments that Hamas is the resistance, something Judith Butler has said before as well. Clearly those arguments are happening just fine. In fact, they're being facilitated and encouraged by these universities. And, I think those arguments are ridiculous and wrong, but universities are obviously teaching them. But nobody is saying to the students that are organizing these protests, the burden is on you to reel back the violence, the calls for Israel to die, the people holding signs that say Al-Qassam's next target pointing at Jewish students. If you organize a protest, you should be held to account when things get out of control. How many times have we heard this exact same argument made about people on January 6th, where they point the finger at Donald Trump, even though he said go protest peacefully. And I think to some extent that's reasonable. But it's the same thing. But there's nothing in this case. Nobody is saying, hey, those students that are organizing this, they really need to step up and tell those other people to cut it out, because they don't, in some cases, want those people to cut it out. No, God, they're leading them. I think we could all agree if they were having a protest on campus or even a sit-in, if it weren't, incredibly disruptive, and, that's really the test, disruption under Supreme Court precedent. But if they were having a protest and chanting something like Israel's committing genocide, okay, that's an opinion. Many people have it. That is an okay. But threats against Jewish students are not okay on a college campus. That's just crossing a line that they would never allow anyone else to cross. And it's insane that these Jewish families now have to worry about these schools at which they spend almost $70,000 a year in tuition. I think it is $67,000, I think, for Columbia now, at last check. I've got to talk to you about Ilhan Omar's daughter, Eliana, because she's made herself a public face of these protests. You're shocked, I know. And she's at Barnard, which is right next to Columbia, and is participating in this sit-in, this nonstop, off again, on again, I guess is a more accurate term, but pernicious sit-in. And she, along with the other students who were not complying with the police directives and so on, came out, got the full Vogue, is it Teen Vogue treatment? It's Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue. It's always Teen Vogue. And look, here she is. She's such a hero. The headline, Isra Hirsi, Ilhan Omar's daughter, on Columbia arrests, Barnard suspension, Palestine protests. The subtitle is, the longtime social justice activist and Barnard Jr., 21, talks to Teen Vogue about the 48 hours following Columbia University's decision to send NYPD into a campus Palestine solidarity encampment. That's not exactly how it went down. But she decides to paint her time there as like she was basically just kicked out of the last homeless shelter in New York with no food and no roof over her head, and says as follows. We were reading our email and it said we had 15 minutes to go get our shit if we wanted it. And we'd have to go with a public safety escort. I was like, I'm not going to do that. But I was a little frantic, like, where am I going to sleep? Where am I gonna go? And also, all of my shit is thrown into a random lot. It's pretty horrible. I don't know when I can go home, and I don't know if I ever will be able to. I mean, could you spare me? I've only got crocodile tears for this person who was out there leading all this shit. And then to double down, she goes, of course, on MSNBC, and listen to this. Now, I want the audience to pay particular attention to something we discussed last week, which is her reference to the alleged chemical weapons that she claims were deployed against her. We know the truth thanks to the Free Beacon, Eliana's publication. Listen.
Do you feel that you are being targeted because of the fact that it is in solidarity with Palestinians and against what Israel is doing to Palestinians?
Oh, this is 100% targeted. Every single protest that we have, there's a group of counter-protesters that bring all of their items, their flags and things like that, and they're not seen as having unsanctioned protests or really receive the kind of disciplinary warnings that many of our fellow organizers receive just for being seen at these protests. And so there is definitely some hypocrisy here, especially you can kind of see it with the students that were sprayed us with the chemical weapons and the fact that there's no public information as to what happened to them, but rather the university is actively discussing what is happening to the students here and making it a whole public spectacle rather than when we haven't done anything to physically harm students, whereas those that sprayed those chemical weapons physically harmed students.
Care to comment on that, Eliana?
Let's just start with the facts. The chemical weapon in question was a fart spray purchased on Amazon for $26 called Liquid Ass. Okay. And
I hear they have that in New York State Supreme in the Trump trial too. I was seeing.
And she says nothing happened to these students. These students who sprayed that were suspended, which is why they are now suing Columbia University for accusing them of spraying a chemical weapon. They were suspended immediately. Columbia President Minouche Shafik testified before the Columbia University Senate and said that these students had used chemical weapons. These students were former IDF soldiers and then came to Columbia. So she spread this misinformation, and the fact that this was not any kind of chemical weapon, but in fact, this harmless fart spray purchased off Amazon surfaced in their lawsuit where they are litigating their suspension. So what she said, that we can't protest, but they can, and nothing happens to them, is total and utter bullshit.
She's on MSNBC and got a spread in Teen Vogue. They got suspended and she got a slot on MSNBC. And
our protests appear to violate the policies. Either the protests violate the policies or they do not. Her protests, her behavior violated the university policy. Beyond that, her mother, apple doesn't fall far from the tree, was questioning the Columbia University president, weighing in on behalf of the protesters, and never disclosed to the American public that her daughter is one of the protesters who's going to suffer the consequences. One would think, at least in the interest of propriety, that Representative Omar would say, my daughter's on the campus and she's one of these agitators. And no. She didn't say a word about that. But in the interest, Omar was actually the one who got Columbia President Shafik to say there are no anti-Jewish protests that I've seen and allowed representatives.
Oh, you're right. She was the one who asked the question.
Have there been anti-Muslim protests? Shafik said no. She said, have there been anti-Jewish protests? Shafik said no. And then Elise Stefanik stepped in and said, I'm sorry, that there have been no anti-Jewish protests. Would you consider death to Zionists? Is that anti-Jewish? And Shafik had to backpedal and say,
and death to Jews.
Actually, death to Jews. They weren't labeled anti-Jewish, like when the notice that they were happening went out. They devolved in that they just devolved in that direction. And then her three co-panelists, the chairman of the board of trustees, Jay Carney's wife, Claire Shipman, and David Scheiser, whatever his name is, they all contradicted her and said, of course, there have been anti-Jewish protests on this campus. So anyhow, what she said is a total and utter lie.
I think we're being too hard on Ilhan Omar's daughter, who, let's face it, for a brief period of time, her uncle became her stepdad when her mom married her brother. So it's, that kind of stuff can cause lasting damage, which can manifest itself in a number of ways, Emily. I'll tell you why the campus cops are not throwing the Israeli protesters off campus. It's pretty clear. It's depicted, for example, in this soundbite from Columbia with the Jewish students sought for. They're singing, they're waving American flags and Israeli flags.
Here, they're not covering their faces.
No faces covered. This is why they don't get bothered, Emily. They're not doing anything. And I realize Israel right now is in the midst of a bombing campaign against a group that attacked it viciously on 10/7, which is controversial. But these students are getting protested. These Americans are getting harassed. It's been amazing to me to watch since 10/7 some of these liberal Jewish Americans have the light bulb go off on top of their head.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, for example, Bill Ackman, right? This billionaire investor, and he's been very outspoken about now DEI on college campuses. And I appreciate people like Bill Ackman, who's got power and influence and a lot of money, joining the fight. But there are many who have been fighting this with every fiber of their being for years, like you, hello, and have been called every name in the book without any support from people like Bill. And it's like a great, pick up arms, rhetorical arms, and fight right alongside of us. But some humility for the fact that you missed it all while it was happening, in my view, is in order.
Absolutely. And again, the Jewish donors that have finally woken up, don't let it end here. Don't be bought off with, oh, we're going to add anti-Semitism training to the portfolio of DEI. That was Bill Ackman's original proposal when this all started. And he said he was so shocked that Jews weren't included in the marginalized groups of against the majority on campus, as if the majority, there is no majority on campus. The one victimized group that's on campus these days is heterosexual white males. They are screwed. They are the last to be hired, the last to be admitted. They have to be 3 times as good. Of course, the Asians have to be 10 times as good as anybody else. But if you're a heterosexual white male, forget it. It's over for you. But Ackman's initial position was, well, gee, the Jews are oppressed by this somehow phantom white WASP majority. He gave that up. There's still a lot of people holding on to that. And it's frankly hilarious. I mean, these protest signs of Queers for Palestine just shows how fundamentally ignorant Americans are about the world. They live in a bubble of victimhood, so they apparently don't even know how people in Muslim countries or in the Middle East, Muslim Middle Easterners treat queers. Good luck holding a gay pride march in Gaza or on the West Bank. Good luck doing that in Nairobi. Good luck doing that in Africa. So the intersectional coalition is now, it's holding together fine, except for Jews. And of course, Jews should be really kind of miffed about this. They were essential to the civil rights movement. They were essential to the anti-apartheid movement. And blacks are screwing them over. You have South Africa dragging Israel into the World Court for genocide, which is a preposterous claim. And you have the majority black politicians now siding with their Palestinian brothers in victimhood. This is ridiculous. And claiming that Jews are somehow the main threat to blacks and to Palestinians. All of this is complete fiction. So this, again, should be a movement to basically shut down as much of the universities as we can, create as many alternatives as we can, and for people to speak up for Western civilization, which has given us the very foundational ideas that the left uses against the West: equality, tolerance, human rights, limited government. These are all exclusively Western ideas. They came out of no place outside of the West. They didn't come out of Africa. They didn't come out of China. They didn't come out of Arabia. They didn't come out of India. And now the left uses the bounty of beautiful Enlightenment ideas to try and tear down the Enlightenment. There is something sick in the West right now. We are a self-canceling culture. The Great Replacement theory is real. I've decided to destroy our birth rate and to flood our country with cultures that en masse are not compatible. We cannot assimilate the number of people who are coming, and we've decided we don't even want to try. And of course, the most galling thing, Megyn, is that the left in the morning says the US and Europe are the most oppressive places on earth. They are fundamentally hostile to people of color. Their grounding ideology is one of white supremacy. That's their line in the morning. And in the afternoon, they say, any country that does not have open borders, any Western country does not have open borders to allow as many millions of people want to come from third world places of color, that the West is then oppressive. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that the West is endemically lethal to people of color and at the same time say we want as many people of color to come in illegally into Western countries as possible, because that's where their lives will be improved.
It's so
Make
true.
up your mind. You get one or the other. You get one or the other. You either get to say the West is racist, or you get to say everybody comes in. You can't say both.
That's right. Or as they now put it, it's not safe for brown and black bodies. It's not safe for brown and black bodies. This discussion is reminding me of a couple of headlines I retweeted today from the Babylon Bee, which is always great in these situations. Here's one. Columbia protesters clarify they only want death to America after America is done paying their student loans off. Yes, exactly right. Here's another one. Palestinian protester tries to argue with skinhead, but they just agree on everything. That's right. The Jews are bad. Yeah, same. I feel the same. And then there's a Columbia student leaves lecture on microaggressions to attend Kill the Jews rally.
Well, again, it's all continuous. If you feel like you are the victim of microaggressions on campus, and that claim of victimhood has catapulted you to the top of the victim totem pole, you have a lot of power and you get drunk with power. You started, Megyn, with the Columbia administrators sort of tiptoeing around the tents and saying, well, we're going to give you another 48 hours. That's because at the same time as we have this profoundly radical and hate-filled ideology of sort of make-believe radicalism and Marxism on college campuses, you have at the same time the very epitome of a capitalist ideology, which is the student as consumer, and adults creating the climbing walls and the Starbucks cafes at every corner on college campuses, and redoing the dormitories to have every amenity. I visited Yale several years ago, and in the Berkeley dining hall, they had tastings of different extra virgin olive oils from Italy. And at the same time, the Yale students, the minority students, are out there claiming that they're so victimized, they're throwing tantrums against the renowned sociologist Nicholas Christakis, telling him to shut up, and who the fuck invited you? Because we as Black students are so victimized in college campuses. At the same time, they have virgin olive oil tastings. It's a profoundly decadent environment that is about anything but knowledge. These students should be down on their knees in gratitude. Yeah.
Here's the New York Post on what we're seeing at your alma mater, Yale, where you went undergrad, decrying capitalism while munching on fresh sushi Monday, while supposedly, by the way, engaging in a week-long hunger strike. So, okay, pick a lane. And then they go on to write, but the festive atmosphere continued even after some were arrested, as some protesters paired off to do some salsa dancing, wide smiles plastered on their faces as they took a well-deserved break from denouncing free enterprise and their university, $85,000 a year to attend.
Where do you begin? I mean, these are the most spoiled people in human history. We thought that the monarchy was bad. I'm not actually would have been in favor of it. I think authorities, great. They were great artistic patrons. I love the Habsburg Empire. I'm in Vienna, and I love they supported a style of music, of architecture that is unparalleled in its beauty. But we think, those spoiled kings and aristocrats that lived off everybody else. These students are living off of everybody else. They are completely self-involved. They have no idea what it took to create the prosperity that they take for granted. Every fabric, every material around you was the product of this extraordinary 400-year race to create knowledge, to transform human existence from what was millennia of the most squalid, disease-filled, poverty-stricken, famine-stricken existence where you barely eked out, to now our problem is obesity. We're so successful. Capitalism, free market economy has been so successful that we are drowning in goods. We are drowning in prosperity, and we have no recollection. We have no knowledge of what it took. And meanwhile, we're tearing down science by saying if any standard of excellence has a disparate impact on Black and Hispanic students, we should tear it down. We should get rid of credentializing in medicine. We should credentialize on the basis of race, not knowledge of medicine. We should hire and promote on the basis of race, not knowledge of how to save a cancer victim or how to solve a heart attack victim. The federal government under Biden is handing out billions of dollars of federal taxpayer money based not on who is the best oncologist or who is the best neurologist to try and cure Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, but who has the darkest skin color. But of course, if you're East Asian, that doesn't count, or if you're an Indian, that doesn't count. In fact, our science profession right now is extraordinarily multinational, multicultural, multiracial. The only groups who are not proportionally represented are Blacks and Hispanics, and that's not because of racism. It's because of the skills gap. It's because the grasp of math and science concepts is so low. That's a problem that begins in the family. It begins in a culture of anti-academic achievement. It begins in stigmatizing academic effort as acting white. That's what has to change. We should not be tearing down our standards, Megyn, but we are a culture now that is engaged in self-loathing. And when the West tears itself down, there's going to be nothing left. The mob can destroy, it cannot create. And we'll see what happens if the West can continuously self-cancels. China will take over. I mean, they are now beating us in many types of nanotechnologies because they do care about merit. They're not handing scientific and math privileges out based on identity politics. They're saying, I'm going to find the best math talent among the student body, and I'm going to throw everything we've got. Meanwhile, America is tearing down gifted and talented programs because of the usual race issue, and we're tearing down our criminal law enforcement because of the usual race issue. This is how a society destroys excellence and civilization.
They've been using the term Selma envy to describe a lot of these students, right? They're just so desperate to be part of something that matters, and they missed that particular movement. And so now they're finding something else and falsely trying to compare themselves to people who actually did suffer and did endure a lot in order to change this country by claiming they're on a hunger strike when really they're ordering sushi to their George Soros funded tent, by claiming, woe is me while they're sneaking off for a little salsa dancing, by, as Ilhan Omar's daughter who went to Barnard, she goes there now, was suspended in connection with one of these protests, calling herself now homeless because she got suspended temporarily, and saying she was the victim of a chemical weapons attack, Heather, because one of the students sprayed a gas, meaning fart spray, on campus that is non-toxic. It says so on the bottle. And she, without mentioning that's what happened, just goes on MSNBC and says, I was the victim of a chemical weapons attack. Sure you were, Isra, whatever her name is.
I mean, we're basically putting a target on our backs and saying, come and invade. I mean, this is such a decadent society. We do not have martial virtues anymore. I wish I could send these people into combat. Obviously, nobody wants to be at war, but these are people who are living a fiction and are completely soft. We have lost any sense of realism and martial virtues. It is completely pathetic, but it all comes to, I remember in the 1990s, you would have faculty writing op-eds in the New York Times saying, oh, where's the student protest? No, you know what? Here's the only thing you're obliged to do and should do on a college campus is learn, shut up and learn some history. Shut up and learn some chemistry. Shut up and learn some literature. Listen to Mozart, listen to Brahms, listen to Chopin, study Tiepolo, study John Milton, study the periodic table. You have 4 years to confront and absorb the greatness of people who went before you, who make you look like pygmies. You should really not be heard. We don't care what you think. Conservatives make the mistake of saying, oh, well, college is all about debate and free speech and critical thinking. Yeah, I'm a little less enamored of that concept. What it should be really about is cramming as much knowledge into the empty noggins of these pathetic crybabies as is possible in 4 years. And then if you want to go out after college and debate whether Trump is a fascist or how many sex organs we should lop off of adolescents today, that's fine. But right now, you should be devoted to one thing, and that is overcoming your embarrassing ignorance about the world and your place in it.
That is so well said. I've got to play this soundbite. I'm going to front it by telling you I don't know exactly how he got it or whether he was there, but Rudy Giuliani posted it on X of a student and her friend who were at the NYU protest. And listen to this exchange, Heather.
And what would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU is doing.
Is there something that NYU is doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU is doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Palestine will be free!
I wish I was more educated. I'm not either.
Oh.
Yes, we all wish that.
Columbia. I was there up at Columbia and we came down. They said NYU students needed our support. So I came down. I heard there's lots of cops. Some people were saying it was getting dangerous.
Heather.
It is so ridiculous. Again, it is coded. They're doing this because they're in a college campus and time is running out. The school year's ending. What will they do when they don't have the bureaucrats to go around handing them out little cookies and saying, well, we're going to negotiate. You can pretend like you're hostages and we're negotiating with you and you're in danger. They'll be thrown out into the real world and there'll be nobody to negotiate with. Now they've got this bunting. They're like little babies swaddled by all of the DEI bureaucrats and the student services bureaucrats and the vice presidents of first gen students. And it's a marvelous, they are codependent addicts. They're addicted to melodrama and to fiction because they are living in fictional worlds. They are not oppressed in America. They have more freedom than has ever been experienced in all of human history. And yet they live in a world that perversely celebrates victimhood. By self-acclamation, they know nothing. Let's give them a map with all of the countries' names wiped out, and let's see if they can even find Gaza on a map, much less Jordan, the Golan Heights, Syria, Iran. Cannot do it. This is completely as much of a social contagion as the trans thing is. It is adolescents striving to have power over adults, which is what every adult craves, whether it's claiming that you've been misgendered and so you can crush an adult under your thumb, or claiming that you are in solidarity with Palestine and therefore are yourself somehow a victim. It gives adolescents power, and that's what they crave.
There's another woman over there named Alex Wagner who was on the same panel making a similar point. I'll stick with you on this, Mike, about how they're trying to, quote, normalize NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, in this abominable Trump courtroom. All right, take a listen to her.
Number one, for all journalism students out there, checkbook journalism, not a thing. It is not a thing. The strategy from Trump's team, at least as I understood it today, seems to be to normalize outlandish things, which is the arguing that NDAs are just a common practice, that lots of wealthy people do them. This is nothing abnormal. Everybody has NDAs. You guys may not have heard about them before, but it happens. This is a thing that is done. Just because Trump had a bunch of people signing NDAs doesn't mean there's anything suspect about that. Catch and kill. It happens all the time. There's nothing illegal about this scheme. This sort of thing happens all the time. This is from Todd Blanche's mouth to the jury. And then my favorite, there is nothing wrong with trying to influence an election. It's called democracy. That is not how the world works.
There is so much to dissect there, Mike. I mean, the NDAs. NBC is the king of NDAs, okay? Somebody in this discussion right here might have been forced to sign one. I have a list of women that's longer than Santa's scroll who have been forced to sign NDAs by NBC News and MSNBC, Alex. So you might want to do your homework before you bash them as a tool that's only used by people who are on criminal trial. Although, on second thought, maybe NBC will be headed there someday and her remarks will prove true. But that's right. And the checkbook journal, like, this is not how journalism is done. As I point out, this is how NBC News handled journalism when it came to its Pulitzer Prize winning story that it let walk out the door and go to the New Yorker. And not just that, Mike, but look at the number of stories that were manipulated, suppressed, buried, or promoted during the 2020 election. We could go back to 16 too for Hillary, but let's just stick with 2020 when it came to Trump v. Biden. To sell to a jury that only the Republican did this evil thing of manipulating the media is going to be very tough.
Yeah, I mean, I was a real lawyer in Colorado for 10 years before I got dragged back into D.C. in the political scene. And I'll tell you, NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, these payments, they happen every day in the legal practice. And just say that Trump is trying to normalize them shows that this young journalist is absolutely clueless and sanctimonious, or she's lying. So it's one of the two, because it's routine in the practice of law and the practice of politics and the practice of journalism that you use non-disclosure agreements, and you have to make payments. You have to settle nuisance claims from time to time, actually quite frequently if you're a big target. You can call it hush money, but it's the settlement of a nuisance claim with a non-disclosure agreement.
The other thing is, Dave, the New York Post reporting on the Hunter Biden laptop was universally suppressed by the mainstream media. And we saw just 2 weeks ago an expose by an NPR insider saying they were intentionally keeping that out of the news at NPR because they knew that it would help Trump. And they openly said, no, this will help Trump. Okay, no cash exchanged hands, but it's in principle the same exact thing. A friendly media outlet that says, I want the election to turn out a certain way and shapes its coverage accordingly.
Well, Megyn, first off, you're right. NBC has treated me very well, so I'm not going to criticize them. But you can see why the mainstream media is critical of a publication like the National Enquirer, who was actually working with Trump to try to help his election in this case. Now, you're bringing up the New York Post story, and I think actually it's fair to bring that up because you had the press who thought this was some Russian disinformation or something that was planted, and they stopped it. And in the end, we don't know exactly where it came from or what, but it's something that probably should have been out there and let the people decide. But yeah, I
know
hear
where it came from. It came from Hunter to a legally blind repairman. Then Hunter never picked it up. And then a legally blind repairman called Rudy Giuliani. And by the way, the FBI had it too and verified that it was Hunter's.
Well, regardless, it is something I agree with you that should be out there. Actually, and as far as NBC, they're the ones who are trying to point to this National Enquirer as what you should not do. And I agree with them because you don't engage with a presidential campaign to try to figure out a way to help them get elected and be used as a tool to buy a story and to kill it just to help a campaign. can I go back to one thing real quick, Megyn? I promise real quick, because you said I was doing the gummies, but the reason why I talked about the statute of limitations issue, I just have to tell you, and Mike and I were talking off air, is because there is a provision of New York law that says that when you move away, like in the White House or Florida, the statute of limitations is paused for up to 5 years. So that's why I still believe that even if it's just misdemeanors, that prosecutors could still bring the case against Trump for falsification of business records. I was not smoking the peace pipe.
I don't think that virtually anybody else accepts that. And none of the legal experts I've been following in this believe that would have resurrected this dead claim. But okay, point taken, no gummies involved.
Thank you.
I do want to, let's see, hold on a second. I want to make sure I've gotten everything here. Oh, okay, this last question on the Trump trial. We had the ruling yesterday morning that virtually everything Trump has ever done is going to come in against him if he gets cross-examined. And we've been talking about this issue in New York State in connection with my pal Arthur Aidala, who represents, speaking of Harvey Weinstein, he represents Harvey Weinstein. And he just had an argument before the New York State Court of Appeals, our highest court, saying you made it impossible for him to take the stand in his own defense by saying, like, every woman he ever, interacted with or had a complaint about him was going to be allowed to take the stand against him. And like the prior bad acts evidence would have been so overwhelming, it would have absolutely ensured a conviction. And the ones they even allowed, even without him testifying, was very lengthy. It was a lengthy list. So Trump is kind of facing the same thing, where they had a hearing and they said, if he takes a stand, it's going to be a lot of bad things we're going to let in. And this is where Andy McCarthy, he had a piece on this today. The lawfare against Trump, Dave, that's already gone down, is really coming back to haunt him, because the judge is going to let in the Letitia James, $450 million judgment against him, fraud, corporate fraud. The case against Weisselberg, his top financial guy, who was found guilty of a criminal violation, another fraudster. The fact that he defamed E. Jean Carroll, but not the fact that he allegedly sexually assaulted her. A liar, he's a liar, and on it goes. So it's almost as if the Democrats have been laying the foundation for all of this to support a criminal conviction in this flimsy case all along. And so you tell me whether there's any chance, given the judge's ruling, all that can come in, that Trump will take the stand.
Megyn, he was never going to take the stand. It would have been walking into a perjury trap. He'd have embarrassing details of his relationship with Stormy Daniels. And yes, prior bad acts can come in up to the judge's discretion. He allowed some, not others. He allowed talking about the Access Hollywood tape, but not the playing of the Access Hollywood tape. I thought he was pretty fair in his rulings, but I think this is all for naught. I mean, look, it's like asking me, what teams do you want to play for in the NBA? I'm never going to play in the NBA. Donald Trump was never going to take the stand in his defense. This is something he's done in the past. He said, I'm going to take the stand, in the E. Jean Carroll case, and didn't. I'm going to talk to Robert Mueller in the investigation, and he didn't. I'm going to take the stand in the civil fraud case, and he didn't. So that's just bluster. He was never going to take the stand in his defense.
He took it in the second E. Jean case. That was one he did take it in. I don't think you should take the stand at all, Mike. Do you?
I wouldn't in this case. I mean, I would say that Trump is different from other criminal defendants. If you're a criminal defense attorney, you generally would advise most of your clients not to take the stand. I would say that with President Trump in some of these matters that, he should be out there, maybe not taking the stand, but he should be out there making public statements to defend himself against this lawfare and election interference. But I don't think he should take the stand in this case. There's little upside and there's a lot of downside, as you just laid out. And this process is so clearly rigged against them. Do not give them any rope to hang you.
Okay. One other story, and then I want to get to these college protests. But before we get to the college protests, we got to talk about Alec Baldwin. Did you guys see this viral video of him? I have to say, I'm not, whatever. Alec Baldwin's got a temper, and he's obviously in a lot of trouble right now out in New Mexico because of the death of this cinematographer on his movie set. But I am 100% team Alec Baldwin when it comes to what just happened to him here. Here's the video for those of you who haven't seen it.
Alec, can you please say Free Palestine one time? Why did you kill that lady?
He's in a restaurant.
You killed that lady and got no jail time? No jail time, Alec. No jail time, Alec. You're putting innocent people in jail, Alec Baldwin.
I'm so sorry.
Free Palestine, Alec, just one time, and I'll leave you alone. I'll leave you alone, I swear. Just say free Palestine one time. One time. One time.
Call the police.
One time, Alec. You know he's a criminal. You know he's a fucking criminal. Come on, Alec, just say free Palestine one time. One time, just one time, please, and I'll leave you alone. Free Palestine. Fuck Israel, fuck Zionism. Please say it. One time.
Could you do me one quick favor?
One time.
And then he gets her with his left hand, clearly grabs the camera or knocks it out of her hand. And she goes by Crackhead Barney. So Crackhead got into an altercation with him and tweeted out that this white devil assaulted me. Dave, you're a prosecutor. If Crackhead came to you and said, I want to file charges against Alec Baldwin for assault, what would you do?
No file, and here's why. She can go to police and she can fill out a complaint, and this could be technically a battery because it's an unwanted touching. It's a very low bar. You have to just have probable cause. But then it would come to my office as prosecutor. And the question is, could I prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt? There is not a jury in the United States that would find Alec Baldwin guilty. When Megyn Kelly is standing up for Alec Baldwin, you know there's not a jury in the world that would side with Crackhead, whatever her name is. And, you know, this shows you the problems with this pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian movement that she's a part of. Number one, they're the ones engaging in bullying and harassment. You can just see it for your own eyes. Number two, their whole philosophy is based on ignorance. They don't know anything about what's going on in Gaza. They just discovered Gaza just a few months ago. This is just a trendy thing. Yeah, it's a trendy thing for them to get on board. And lastly, there's no self-awareness here. I mean, she actually portrays herself as the victim. Meanwhile, Alec Baldwin is opening the door, asking her politely to please leave. And she's the one who thinks she's the victim. This is why they're losing support for people who see things like this. This is why even you, Megyn Kelly, come to the defense of Alec Baldwin, and justifiably so.